What is up, everybody? Welcome to Stat Diggers, where we go balls deep into the stats for this upcoming card. And this week we do have UFC Vegas 33, Uriah Hall going against Sean Strickland. And we have 15 fights. That means me and your Uncle Weezy had to work overtime. Tons of work put in, especially Uncle Weezy. He was on vacation this weekend and still made the time to complete this beautiful stat model he has. So shout out to Weezy for that. Before we get started, I do want to do a quick recap for UFC Vegas 32. I usually do them on my channel, but with 15 fights, I really had no time to go live today. So first, I'll kick it over to Uncle Weezy. Uncle Weezy, kind of your thoughts on last night's card, and how'd you do?
I broke completely even between DFS and betting, but it was a very light betting week for me because I was on vacation and there was just so much going on between trying to get ready for the show tonight and then being out with my friends. There were 10 of us out there. We were drinking heavily. We had a great time. But, man, I was watching those fights and some of those judging decisions, even in a loud room where there's 10 other people in there and I wasn't watching at all times, man, some of those decisions were just awful. And I know the Twitter sphere was, alive with all the criticism. There were some great jokes being thrown around on post shows yesterday. I mentioned a couple of them on my Twitter. That was a hell of a night. Some great fights. I'm looking forward to getting into these 15 fights tonight, man. But I don't know, man. This isn't going to be the best card that we've had all year, but we got it. We've got all the numbers. We're ready to go through all 15 fights, man. And if we can't find some opportunities here, I'm going to be pissed off because we worked hard for this one. So I think we're going to find some spots for all you guys that we can maybe make some money off the bookies this weekend.
Yep, 100% agree. So for me, I did go minus 0.72 units on the night, but I will say the violence bets still kept up. I went 4 for 6 on the violence bets. Hit the Darren Elkins versus Derek Minner under 2.5 we talked about. Hit the Randy Costa Giannis fight doesn't go to decision that we talked about. The two losses were the Elkins wins in round 3, which just was a little sprinkle there, and then also had Soriano Allen under, which my goodness, that fight played out like nobody ever thought. I mean, the whole conversation all week was, can Allen get this fight down to the mat? And hey, it didn't matter. Allen attempted maybe 1 takedown, 0 takedowns. So other than that, hit the fight does not start round 3 and Mickey Gall, Jordan Williams, and also got Eubanks inside the distance. What really killed me, and it would have been a phenomenal night if Kyler Phillips won. Even if he got a draw, it would have been a nice winning night. But man, that judge's decision, man, I just don't see how you can't score that a draw. I mean, Phillips went out there, knocked him down right away, beat his ass for 5 minutes, and then hurt him multiple times, and then was so close to finishing the fight at the end of the round. And it was weird because we saw a lot of really questionable stoppages earlier in the card where probably worse stoppages, whereas if that fight would have been stopped, I wouldn't really have complained. And at the end of the round, Paiva was not able to get up. He was just kind of laying on the ground. And I was really concerned that Paiva would not even be able to start round 2. But yeah, he did. He won the next 2 rounds. And I thought to myself, hey, in a worst case scenario, it's a draw. And man, I just don't see how you can't score that a draw. Any thoughts on that? Did you think it was a draw or was I looking at it wrong? I mean, I was completely sober and I thought it was a draw for sure. What do you think about that?
Well, I mean, I was in the Discord and I watched that whole first round, and I said in the Discord, and I said it to you too, that I don't think Paiva's getting off the stool. He looked like he was done after that first round. So yeah, I mean, that was definitely a 10-8 round. It was this close to finishing. It was very reminiscent, in my opinion, of the Valiev-Barcelos fight, where Valiev wins 2 rounds by the slightest of margins that could have went either way. And then in the second round, Barcelos nearly beats Valiev to death. And the only reason that the fight wasn't stopped is because Mike Beltran just let it keep going, like sometimes Tyone does. So sometimes you get these situations where you have one fighter who clearly won the fight, but then you have these judges who, and it pisses me off when it's the third round that's close and the judges already know that the one round was close and one round was a murder. And then when you have that third round and you have the chance to do the right thing as the judge and say, well, it was a close round, but why don't I give it to the guy who almost finished the fight in the second round or in the first round? They could have done that with the Barcelos fight a couple weeks ago. They could have easily done that for Kyler Phillips last night. So, yeah, man, the UFC's got a serious judging problem. I know it's a commission thing, But really, I think in order to keep some credibility with the fans, Dana White's going to have to start having somewhat of a discussion in public here about how they're going to fix this, because everybody's getting pissed off, and rightfully so.
Yeah, man, I was pissed off. I had a 2.5 units on Kyler Phillips at minus 215. I bet this bet like 3 weeks ago. The line closed at like Phillips minus like 350, minus 360. So it just hurts, man. I mean, I thought like worst case scenario, it's going to be a draw. So that really surprised me. I was pissed off, man. I turned the TV off. I didn't even watch the main event because I went right into looking into this card because I was already behind anyway. So yeah, that was very upsetting. Probably the worst or the most upset I was since like the Mason Jones Alan Patrick fight. That pissed me off as well. But yeah, something needs to be done. I didn't even touch on the Maverick Barber fight. I had no action on Miranda Maverick, but man, clear Maverick win. I thought she won round 1. I think Macy Barber landed maybe like 5 strikes, and then round 2, it's a close round up until Maverick takes her down, takes her back, and then pounds her out for the last 15 seconds of that fight or the round. Clear Maverick wins. So I definitely feel for everybody that had a Maverick ticket in their hands for sure, because I thought Maverick won. Any thoughts on that one?
Yeah, the thought was that I cannot believe that Macy Barber got that decision. And was that a split or was that a unanimous?
I believe it was a split.
Okay, because if it was a unanimous, that would have just been awful. But yeah, either way, there's just no excuse for that. I don't see how. It almost seems like the judges really don't know. I mean, it's just like there's somebody's cousin, there's somebody's brother. There's got to be some kind of, DXC said it in the chat thread. There's a corruption problem here. And I mean, we even had the recent fight with T-Bow and Rory. That was just a complete. It was a theft. So. These things need to be talked about. I hope fighters get more vocal about it on Twitter. I'd like to hear from Miranda Maverick. I'd like to hear from Kyler Phillips. They should talk about about those decisions and about how those decisions made them feel, because they need to hear it from these fighters. These fighters give up too much of their lives. They sacrifice too much to be treated by judges this way.
Yeah, and I will say that Kyler Phillips did fight like a complete idiot, dude. Like, why do spinning shit when you're completely gassed out instead of going for takedowns where you were having success? So, it is what it is. I thought it was a draw, but he very well could have won that fight if he wasn't fighting like an idiot. Just go for takedowns in that second round. But it is what it is. You got to have a short-term memory in this game. I mean, stuff like that happens. That's why we love the sport. It's unpredictable, and we got to move on to this card. Oh my goodness, to this card. This card is going to be a challenge for sure. I stayed up all night taping this card. As soon as I woke up, I started taping the card. I still have a couple more fights to do, but I feel like I'm pretty prepared here. But man, this is a complete shit show, just to say the least. But we got some fights. You can't complain. I love watching fights, and I'll sit back and I'll enjoy watching a lot of these fights. I think sometimes where people crap on the card, and I typically don't crap on a card until this week, but I think the cards that we do crap on, they end up surprising us. So before we get into it, if you guys can leave a like on the video, it does go a long way. Also, subscribe here to Pub Sports Radio if you have not yet. We go live on Sunday every 7 o'clock, 15 p.m. Eastern time to give an early look for the next card, no matter how bad the card is like this one. But I'm sure we're going to find a lot of spots. I'm sure we're going to make some money, and I can't wait to get into it. Do want to shout out the chat for hanging out. We got Nigel Lee in the chat. We have Dylan in the chat. B, the Gaming Wolf. We have Alan Epstein. We have Beach City TV. Devontae Smith. Is that the real Devontae Smith? That's Uncle Weezy. I'm not sure, but we have Jack Attack MMA. Nigel Lee. We got the General in the chat as well. Juan, everybody in the chat. Dan, what's up, Dan? Dan Goldstein, the comedian in the chat as well. We have Matt Reese, also stellar in the chat. The chat is really moving. We got a dono here from the man, Dan Goldstein. Appreciate the dono for sure, Dan. As always, thanks for the reads, Weezy and Brady. I made a profit, and you kept me from selling my body on the OnlyFans. There you go. That's the goal. That's the goal, Dan, as always. We have Mac in the chat as well. Sean V. Absolute shit show, General. But we got some fights we're looking forward to for sure. So I say we get into it right here, and we will start with the first fight of the night. And we have Ryan Benoit going against Zaruk Adashev. We have Ryan Benoit, who is 31 years old, 5'5", 68-inch reach, going against Zaruk Adashev, 28 years old, 5'5", 65-inch reach. So Benoit is going to have a 60 or a 3-inch reach advantage there. Take a look at the last couple fights. So Zaruk Adeshev did make his UFC debut against Tyson Nam. He got knocked out. And then he fought against Sumadarji, and a lot of people, including me, thought that Medarji was going to go out here and knock this bum out or this guy out in the first round. And he was able to survive all 3 rounds. Of course, lost a decision, got outstruck in every round, but he was able to survive against Sumadarji, who I'm pretty high on personally. So he is 3-2 in his last 5 fights. And as far as Ryan Benoit, he's 2-3 in his last 5 fights. Won a split decision over Freddie Serrano, lost a split decision over the champion, Brandon Moreno, did knock out Askin Mokhtarian. He lost a split decision to Alatang Haley, not the best look there, and then lost a decision against Tim Elliott, which was a very competitive fight, which I had a bet on Tim Elliott that night, and I was not so sure he'd get it done. So interesting fight here to start off the card. Anything here, Weezy?
Uzbekistan, stand up. Your boy, Zaruk Adeshev, in the house, boasting that 3-3 professional record. This is a curtain jerker for a reason. I don't even know what's happening here, but let's break it down. Benoit, by far the more experienced mixed martial artist, 17 fights to 6, about 100 more minutes of cage time, 6 more years in the game, and 6 more UFC fights. We see that Benoit is a really good finisher when he does win fights. 10 pro wins, 9 of them coming inside the distance, 8 by knockout, 1 by sub. So only one of those 10 wins coming by decision. While for Zaruk Adeshev, he's only got 6 fights, 3-3 record. I'm not even sure how this guy got into the UFC. It was a 3-fight winning streak over Christian Medina, Ron Leon, and Tevin Dice that got him into the UFC. And then he's lost 2 in a row against Nam and Medarji. So we see that Adeshev has finished 2 of his 3 wins by knockout, and he's been finished in 2 of his 3 losses, once by knockout, once by sub. While for Benoit, it looks like 2 of his 7 losses have come by way of submission. If we look at the striking stats for these guys, we got a 41.2% striking accuracy for Benoit, not very good. 2.95 significant strikes landed per minute out of 7.15. But Benoit showing some really good power for a flyweight. At 1.5% knockdowns per total significant strikes landed, that means 0.66 knockdowns per 15 minutes. While for Adeshev, he's only landing 1.93 significant strikes out of 8.3 attempted for a pitiful 23.26% striking accuracy. He is showing a 60% striking defense, though, but he's absorbing, about 1.5 more strikes than he lands, while Benoit is also getting hit more than he hits his opponents. So both of these guys have negative significant strike differences, below 1 significant strike ratios. But Benoit does have power. That is one thing that we have seen from him. We're talking about 4 UFC knockdowns in 8 fights. So that is nothing to sneeze at right there. So he's definitely got some power here. That's what we're going to be looking for as a path to victory for Benoit. Even though he is a state champion wrestler, he is not using it very much in the UFC. As we see in the grappling statistics, 8 UFC fights for Benoit, but only 8 takedown attempts. And he's only gotten 2 of them for a 25% takedown accuracy. Not very good. Only 5% of his time in the UFC cage has been spent in control time positions with him controlling his opponent. But even though he's a state champion wrestler, we see that he's being controlled 26.63% of the time. So he's being controlled about 5 times more than he's controlling his opponents. So even though he has that wrestling background, he doesn't seem to use it very effectively in the UFC. Adeshev, though, 0 for 1 on his takedown attempts, and nobody's attempted to take him down thus far in the UFC. So basically 100% of his fights have taken place in non-control time positions in the center of the cage. Obviously, Benoit, having 8 UFC fights to only 2 for Adeshev, has fought the better brand of competition here. 1.04 ratio for Benoit, 3.13-3 record is his average opponent. While for Adeshev, he's just faced Sumadarji and Tyson Nam thus far and lost both of those fights. So if I'm just looking at my notes here, if you're hanging your hat on the Benoit side, here's what you're looking at. Benoit's advantages are that he has about 3 times as much pro experience and cage time. He's got 6 more years in the game, 6 more UFC fights. He's got a 3-inch reach advantage over Adeshev. He's got a 90% finish rate, 80% of those finishes coming by KO. He's got good power for a flyweight too, at the 1.5% knockdowns per total significant strikes landed. And Adeshev, he's been knocked out by Tyson Nam, so he's sporting an almost 2% knockdowns per total significant strikes absorbed. So a path to victory could be a KO for the powerful striker in Benoit and somebody that's been knocked down in Adeshev. And Benoit's also fought the better level of competition, having fought guys like Tim Elliott, Brandon Moreno, and he's got a win over Sergio Pettis back in 2015. While for Adeshev, there's not much to hang your hat on. He's 3 years younger. He's got a 67% win rate by finish, but he's only got 3 professional wins. And maybe he takes advantage of the fact that Benoit gets out-controlled by his opponents, 26.63% to 5.26%. So perhaps he could use some wrestling in order to control the fight on the ground, maybe win around here or there. But I'm definitely leaning Benoit here as the more experienced guy. But one thing I want to bring up too is this fight was supposed to happen a little bit ago. Benoit missed weight and actually looked really, really bad on the scales. And I believe he was supposed to fight Adeshev. Let me just check that out to make sure here. It was the fight that was canceled, was against Adeshev, that was supposed to happen May 8th. So this fight was supposed to happen in May. It's rescheduled for now. So these guys have been preparing each other for quite a while. What do you got for us on this shit show?
Yeah, I mean, I like Benoit here quite a bit, to be honest. You mentioned the state champion wrestling, and man, you got to think that he should probably come in here with a game plan of, hey, getting this fight down to the mat. I think he'll have a huge advantage if he does go for takedowns yet. We have not seen anybody attempt a takedown on Zaruk yet in the UFC. Of course, Sumadarji's not going to shoot a takedown. Tyson Nam's not going to shoot a takedown, but Ryan Benoit has that wrestling in his back pocket. Also a brown belt in BJJ as well. Good submission game as well. I mean, he has a submission or two on his record as well. And you mentioned the power of Ryan Benoit for a flyweight. This guy hits like an absolute truck. If you watch some of these fights, I mean, the last fight with Tim Elliott, I went back and watched that fight, and man, he was hitting Tim Elliott with some shots that I don't think anybody else besides a Tim Elliott who has an unreal chin can take. And he was hitting with some knees, some very heavy shots that I do not think that Zaruk is going to be able to handle there. And it's just weird seeing Zaruk Adeshev in the UFC. I mean, he's 3-3. But yeah, I like Benoit here quite a bit. The more experienced fighter as well. Hits like an absolute truck. And I think if he does choose to go to that takedown route, I think he definitely can have success there. I do want to take a look at the odds. I haven't really took a look at any of the odds this week yet. We see that Benoit is hard to find the odds with so many fights, 15 fights. Open up -140 in Benoit, currently -135. Zaruk Adeshev opening up +120 and currently +115. So yeah, interesting. I do lean Benoit personally. We do not have any odds on the fight. Doesn't go to decision on this one yet, but I might be taking a look at Benoit inside the distance. I think it could be a pretty good price there. Like you mentioned, a 90% finish rate. We have seen Zaruk finished, I believe, in 2 of his 3 losses. So any preference on, I don't have the odds yet, but maybe a fight doesn't go to decision bet, or maybe a Benoit inside the distance bet, Weezy?
Yeah, I'm not really sure, man. Because Benoit he's finished 67% of his wins, and he's been finished in 40% of his losses in the UFC. So we're talking about 8 fights, so 2 wins by finish and 2 losses. So 4 of his 8 fights, so 50% of his fights finish inside the distance, and for Adeshev, it's 50%. So it's about a 50-50 chance. I mean, whatever you're getting the plus money on would probably be the better way to go. But I could see Benoit definitely finishing this inside the distance, but you also have to worry about the weight cut. Yeah. Because we did see Benoit have that horrific weight cut. He looked horrible on the scale last time. If he hasn't figured that out, I might wait to bet Benoit. If he looks good on the scales, I might jump on it then. But I might just have to let the line get away from me because I can't see too many reasons here to be on Adeshev. So I wouldn't pick a time prop on this. I just like Benoit, and I would probably bet him inside the distance, but I'd have to see where that money line is too.
Yep, for sure. I agree. And a good point, waiting for the weigh-ins, because, yeah, not a good look for sure. So I'm probably going to sit back, wait for the weigh-ins on this one as well. But, yeah, the lean and the pick for me is going to be Benoit for sure. All right, next we have a very interesting fight here. We have Philip Rowe going against Orion Kosuke, the brother of Louis Kosuke, who busted my parlay last time out. We'll talk more about that. But we have Philip Rowe, who is 31 years old, 6'3", 80-inch reach, and Orion Kosuke, 27 years old, 5'11", 71-inch reach. So the big elephant in the room here is 9-inch reach advantage for Philip Rowe. That's pretty huge there. We will take a look at the last couple fights. So Kosei is going to be making his UFC debut. He did have a Contender Series fight against Matt Dixon, was able to get a TKO in that fight. As far as Philip Rowe, made his Contender Series appearance against Leon Shabazian, got his ass kicked in the first round. Shabazian kind of gassed himself out, and then he was able to finish Shabazian in that fight. And then he lost to Gabe Green, who, don't get me wrong, is a pretty good fighter there. So, Rowe is 4-1 in his last 5 fights. Kosuke is 5-0 in his last 5 fights. What do you have for this one, Weezy?
Really interesting stylistic matchup. Rowe's got a good submission game. Orion's a really good wrestler. Orion fights out of both stances. But yeah, you mentioned it, 4 inches of height and 9 inches of reach for Philip Rowe here. That is going to be something that if he can keep the fight at range and really succeed with his distance striking, Orion's going to have a really tough night. Rowe is a little more experienced, 10 pro fights to 7, about 20 more minutes of cage time. But Philip Rowe's been in the game 4 years longer than Uriah Kosei. So Uriah Kosei's got 7 pro fights, but in only just under 3 years of an MMA career. So he's only 27 years old. Kid's still young. He's getting better. In terms of UFC experience, both of these guys have had a Contender Series fight, and Philip Rowe has had 1 UFC fight, and he lost that one against Gabe Green. And what's important to note, too, is that Gabe Green could have finished him there late in that fight. Gabe Green just he even said it after the fight. He said, I don't even know why I didn't try to finish him, but I just kind of went into the cruise mode there. So he could have easily finished him, and Shabazian was pretty damn close, too. So Philip Rowe is definitely, even in the fights that he's won in the UFC, had some opponents really put it on him. So he's kind of an up and down fighter here. And then, you look at the finish rates, you guys. This is important. Philip Rowe has a 100% finish rate in his 7 wins, and Uriah Kosei has a 100% finish rate in his 7 wins. 6 wins by knockout, 1 for submission by Orion, and we got 4 wins by submission and 3 wins by knockout for Philip Rowe here. And we see that in Philip Rowe's 3 losses, he's been finished in one of those 3 losses by knockout. So the striking numbers are pretty limited. We've got a 2-fight sample size for Rowe. We got a 1-fight sample size for Kosei. Both of these guys pretty accurate, above 60%. Philip Rowe has shown some power. He's got 1 knockdown and 126 strikes landed. Philip Rowe landing 5 strikes but absorbing 5.34. And then we see in Orion's striking numbers, we see that wrestling base that he has, as he's landing 4.56 but only absorbing less than 2. So an over 2.5 significant strike difference, an over 2 significant strike ratio, very good. And both of these guys have over 50% striking defense. Orion a little bit better at 56. And Philip Rowe has been knocked down, and over 2% of the significant strikes landed against him. So, we've seen Rowe get battered and bruised in there quite a bit, but he can take a beating and come back from it, as we saw in the Shabazian fight. In terms of offensive wrestling, Rowe has attempted 6 takedowns in 2 fights. He's gotten 2 of them, 33.33% takedown defense. Rowe has out-controlled his opponents 22% to 12%. So he's shown a decent ground game and a little bit of an ability to get it there. While Kosei has only attempted 1 takedown, but he's gotten it. So he's got 100% takedown percent. He's getting 1.02 per 15 minutes. And he's getting 30% control time, but he's allowing 30% control time. So that tells us that Kosei's fights are taking place in control time positions over 60% of the time. Definitely something that we need to pay attention here to, is that Kosei will be trying to wrestle constantly. That's what he's done in the past. That's what he's good at. That's what his base is. So I do expect this fight to take place on the mat and up against the cage. And we see that Philip Rowe has only got a 25% takedown defense. He's being taken down 1.78 times per 15 minutes. And even though he has been taken down 3 times and he's only gotten 2, we do see that Philip Rowe has probably got a pretty good get-up game, reversal game, where he's attacking with submissions, because even though he's been taken down more than he's taken down his opponents, he's out-controlling his opponents 2-1. In terms of strength of schedule, not much to look at here, but we do know that with Rowe having fought Gabe Green and Leon Shabazian in his last 2 fights, and he's probably fought a little bit better competition. If we look at the last 5 for Uriah Kosei, it's Matt Dixon, Wally Wester, Daniel McWilliams, Joseph Cropshot, and Ryan Wilson. I've never heard any of these guys. So I don't, Orion definitely was fighting lower level guys before he got to the Contender Series. He's had a couple fights canceled, so we've been waiting for his debut for a while. So let me just sum it up here. I'm looking for the Philip Rowe advantages. I'm looking at that 4-inch height and that 9-inch reach advantage. That's huge. I'm seeing a little more experience with 3 more pro fights, 20 more minutes of cage time, 4 more years as a pro. We got a 100% finish rate for Rowe. We've got a 60% striking accuracy and a 0.8 knockdowns per total significant strikes landed. And he's out controlling his opponents almost 2-1, 22% to 12%. While the advantages for Orion Cosce are that he's a switch stance fighter, so he's a little confusing on the feet. 100% finish rate as well for him. He's got great wrestling and top control, and Rowe has only shown 25% takedown defense thus far in the UFC. He's been taken down 1.78 times per 15 minutes. Rowe's been chinny thus far in the UFC, getting knocked down 1.78 times per 15 minutes. But Cosce also out volumes and outlands his opponent by a significant margin because of that wrestling and that top control. So I think I'm actually kind of leaning Cosce here with the wrestling advantage if he can keep it there. But we're just going to have to see the conditioning that he brings. We're going to have to see how he can stay out of trouble because Rowe is a good submission artist off of his back. But if this fight does stay on the feet, boy, a 9-inch reach advantage and a 4-inch height advantage for Rowe. If we can see him use that distance striking to maintain range and make it really difficult for Cosce to shoot in, then you could see a really easy path to victory there for Rowe. Which way are you leaning on this one?
Yeah, I'm kind of leaning on the Rowe side. You mentioned that 9-inch reach advantage is huge, and yes, he definitely can be taken down. And what I like about Orion Cosce compared to his brother Lewis is going to be this guy actually has some good cardio. We saw him go into the third. I believe he has like 3 third-round finishes. Cosce and his brother Luis Cosce, I believe that was like the first time his last fight. I forget who he fought, but he lost. The first time he's ever been out of that first round. So at least Orion's more tested. He's been to the second round. He's been to the third round, and he can keep up a pace and he can wrestle. But the problem is, Rowe, his ground game is pretty good. I mean, off his back, he throws up submissions. I've seen him get multiple reversals and sweeps. He got a couple in the Gabe Green fight as well. And I like his game off the back. He has 40% finish rate by submission. And I think if he can keep this on the feet or at least just make Cosce work, I think he's very live here. And you wouldn't really think so because of the line, because Cosce is a pretty big favorite. And maybe people are just looking at the fact that, Cosce, very good wrestler, which he is. He's a very good wrestler. He has very, very good ground and pound. And Rowe has a poor takedown defense, 25%. But I do think that Rowe has a pretty solid ground game, and I think he's going to make Cosce work. And I don't know if his cardio is going to be able to keep up with the pace that Rowe puts on, because he does put on a really heavy pace. He comes forward, he throws a ton of volume, and that 9-inch reach advantage, like I mentioned. But we have Orion Cosce opening up -185. He's now -170. And Philip Rowe opening up +160. He's now +145. So some money is coming in on the Rowe side. On DraftKings Sportsbook, he is +155 as well. I'm kind of looking at him as a live dog. I feel like his fight's like a lot closer than the line indicates, especially with the 9-inch reach advantage, especially with the underrated ground game of Rowe. Because, yes, I do think he'll be taken down, but I do think he can work his way back up, hit reversals, sweeps. And if he can get on top of Cosce, that'll be something like he's never experienced before. He's never really had resistance yet. He's not really fought anybody that could, give him resistance. So I do think this is going to be the toughest fight of Orion's career. And I just don't really get the line here. As far as you see it on the screen, their violence. And Uncle Weezy mentioned 100% finish rate for both fighters. Orion Cosce, 100% finish rate. Philip Rowe, 100% finish rate. Neither guy has ever won by decision, ever. So I can kind of see a situation where maybe Cosce is able to take him down, letting some ground and pound, gets him out of there. Or even on the feet, like Cosce throws a ton into all of his shots. Maybe he does, clip Rowe, put him down. Or I can also see a situation where Cosce kind of gasses out and Philip Rowe is able to take over and just put on him late on the fight and finish the fight there. So in terms of the line here for the fight doesn't go to decision, they did have it at -190 for the fight doesn't go to decision. Fight goes to decision is +150. I'm assuming they're going to put the over-under at 2.5 rounds. And I'm kind of thinking under. I'm kind of thinking violence here, Uncle Weezy.
Yeah, 100% finish rate for both guys. We don't know, I know when we saw Lewis fight, I mean, he gassed out early, but boy, he never gave up. I mean, he never even stopped moving his head when he was really getting ground and pounded there. And I think we might see the same out of Orion. We haven't seen Orion lose yet, so we don't know if he's the type of guy that will look for the door. I don't think he will. And Rose only been finished in 1 out of his 3 pro losses. So, it might not be, what I like to go for the fights that have when both fighters are getting finished in their losses more than they are in their wins. Because sometimes with the wins, it just means that they've been crushing cans. And when they step up to this level, they won't be able to finish somebody of this level. So both of these guys are fairly new to the UFC. So we have to prepare for the possibility that they're not going to be able to finish at this level because we haven't seen it yet, really. So I don't know if I would bet the under here, but I do think that, either one of these guys could get a submission or a knockout for sure. But, it's just hard. It's hard to know because we don't have much of a sample size for either of these guys. And we haven't seen much of these guys fighting the level of competition that they're at right now.
Yep, I 100% agree there. So, my pick is going to be Philip Rowe. I'll take the dog there. I don't know if I'm going to bet it yet. If I will bet, I probably got to do it soon because it does look like that line is moving. So, get to the next fight, and it's a pretty good fight here. Ronnie Lawrence going against Trevin Jones. We have Ronnie Lawrence, who is 29 years old, 5'8", 68-inch reach. Trevin Jones, 30 years old, 5'7", 70-inch reach. Take a look at the last couple of fights. Ronnie Lawrence on I believe it was a contender series against Jose Johnson. I think he got like 12 takedowns in that fight. This guy is an absolute monster when it comes to takedowns. He's like a Marab where he just goes for takedowns nonstop. But with that said, he doesn't have the best top control at all. And against Vince Cachero, same thing. 8 or 9 takedowns in that fight as well. So for DraftKings, Ronnie Lawrence is definitely somebody you're going to want to take a look at for that takedown upside. As far as Trevin Jones, he made his UFC debut against Tamir Valiev in a fight where this guy got his ass kicked in that first round. He was almost finished, and then he came back in that second round and knocked out Tamir Valiev, which, really good win. But it did turn into a no contest due to him popping for, I believe, marijuana. And then after that, he did knock out Mario Batista. And both those fights, I do believe he was the dog as well. And we are going to see him as – it's a pick 'em here. It's -110 each way for this fight. So, interesting fight here. Kind of a – wrestler versus a striker here. Trevin Jones also has a black belt in BJJ for what it's worth. So, interesting fight. Weezy, what do you got for us here?
This is a good one, man. This is a really good one. I've really liked what I've seen out of Lawrence so far, and I've really liked what I've seen out of Trevin Jones so far, even though he's cost me money both times because I bet against him. With Lawrence, we got both these guys are, pretty young. Jones 30, Lawrence 29. Not much in the measurables here. Trevin Jones is a southpaw, got a 2-inch reach advantage. Trevin Jones, the more experienced fighter, more than twice as many pro fights. About 150 more minutes of cage time, and 5 more years in the mixed martial arts game. So Jones has got some measurables here, and he's also got the experience advantage. If we look at how these guys are winning fights, neither one of these guys are spectacular finishes. We got Ronnie Lawrence finishing 57% of his pro wins, 4 out of 7 by knockout. And we've got a 54% overall finish rate in 13 wins for Trevin Jones, which is 7 wins. So 4 of them by submission, 3 of them by knockout. And we see that in Ronnie Lawrence's 1 loss, it came by decision. And in Trevin Jones's 6 losses, he's only been finished once. So both of these guys, in their 7 career losses, there's only been 1 time that one of these guys has been finished. If we look at the striking numbers, we see that, Ronnie Lawrence is landing 3.8 strikes, but only absorbing 1.09. That's a function of the dominant top game that he's shown thus far in the UFC. While Jones is landing 3.84 strikes, but absorbing 6.81. So he was getting his ass shaved by Timur Valiev. And I mean, really, he took a body shot that was so vicious. If it was anybody but Beltran or Tyone reffing that fight, that would have been over, and that would have been a loss for Trevin Jones. But he gutted it out, and that's why we see that in his 6 losses, he's only been finished once. This dude is tough as nails, and he will not quit. So, but he's absorbing way more strikes than he's landing. And then we look at Trevin Jones, 35.56% striking defense. That's not going to get the job done here. And he's getting knocked down on over 1% of the significant strikes that are landed against him for 1.17 times per 15 minutes. Now, if we go into the grappling statistics, here's where we find, Ronnie Lawrence's strength. 2 UFC fights, 26 takedown attempts. That's 13 takedown attempts per fight. And he's gotten 20 of them. That's 77%. He's on his takedowns. He's successful. That's incredible. He's averaging 10.86 takedowns per 15 minutes and a crazy almost 2/3 control time, 64.78% control time. So, those numbers just tell you what Ronnie Lawrence is going to do. He's going to put a pace on you. He's going to shoot takedowns. He's not going to get tired. And then when he does get on top of you, he's still throwing 6.48 significant strikes per minute, and he's working you over with ground and pound. He breaks dudes, and we've seen it both times from him. He really put it on Jose Johnson for 3 rounds, kicked the shit out of him, and then Vince Cachero was a finish. So, we've been very impressed by Ronnie Lawrence thus far. But here's the thing. Trevin Jones, like you mentioned, is a black belt, and he is a no-gi grappling champion. This guy is very, very, very legit on the ground. And it's a very interesting stylistic matchup because Trevin Jones thus far has not really been able to go to his wrestling much. But let's see. He's 1 of 5 on his takedown attempts, so he's only gotten 1 takedown, but he still averages over 1 per 15 minutes. And he's getting 17.36% control time while only yielding 1.31% control time. So when he does get the takedown, he's not getting reversed, and he is maintaining top position and doing something with it. This could be a problem for Lawrence. This reminds me just a little bit of Fabinski against Muniz, where Lawrence, the path to victory for him is going to take him right into Trevin Jones's grappling game, which is very good. 31% of his pro wins by submission. So, it'll be Lawrence's ability to be able to avoid the submissions of Jones when he's on top of him. If he's able to successfully do that, this should be a pretty easy win for him. But Trevin Jones has got some power in that lead left hand of his. He's a southpaw. Lead right hand. He's a southpaw, so his power hand is his left hand. But the 2 knockdowns that he's gotten in the UFC have been via the right hand, which is very interesting. So it's the lead right hand that's knocking people down for Trevin Jones. And if this stays on the feet, we could see that right hand maybe creating the 3rd knockdown that he's gotten. So this is a very, very interesting stylistic matchup here. We see that Trevin Jones has fought Mario Batista and Timur Valiev thus far, and he's got 2 wins in those 2 fights. And Ronnie Lawrence is 2-0 as well, Vince Cachero and Jose Johnson. And Johnson's a really good kickboxer. So both of these guys, 2-0 in the UFC. Both of these guys got power. Ronnie Lawrence with a ton of wrestling, though, and that's where his power comes from, is the pace that he puts on you with the takedowns and the ground and pound. So if you're on the Jones side, I think what you're going to be hanging your hat on is that he's a no-gi grappling champion. He's got fantastic power in his lead right hand from a southpaw. He's got 12 more pro fights, 150 more minutes of cage time than Lawrence, and 4.5 more years as a pro. And he's got a 4.08% knockdowns per total significant strikes landed. So even though he is a more talented grappler, he is actually knocking people out as well. So he might be the more well-rounded mixed martial artist here. While if we look at Lawrence, it's the excellent wrestling, conditioning, pace, and top game. 20 takedowns in 2 fights, 77% takedown accuracy. And then with that accuracy, he's getting almost 2/3 control time, 64.78% control time, only 6.76% control time against. So his wrestling and top control have been fantastic. Fantastic striking ratios as a function of having that dominant top game, where he's landing 3.8 and only absorbing 1.09, while Jones is landing 3.84 and absorbing 6.81. So 61% striking defense for Lawrence. Jones only has 35% striking defense and a 1.15% knockdowns per total significant strikes absorbed. So he's very hittable. So yeah, there's advantages for both these guys. Is Trevin Jones going to go 3-0 and win 3 times as an underdog here? I know this is probably a pretty close line, but I think he'll probably wind up the underdog because Lawrence's wrestling has been so eye-popping. And what is really eye-popping as well is how much Tajik Bey is blessing us with his presence right here in the chat. We got the GOAT of MMA betting in here with us. Big ups, Tajik. Thanks for supporting the show, man. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, shout out to Tajik. He says the GOAT here, little appreciation for all the great work you do. And he doesn't stop. He then says, and then some, appreciate that, Tajik. He then says a little more. And then let's see what else we got here. A little more. And let's see what else we got here. Almost. Thank you, Tajik. Yeah, I got tagged in a tweet from a Tajik Bey, I believe, on Twitter. And it was like a takedown, I believe, on DraftKings. It was like something crazy, like $7,000, $8,000 takedown. Tajik, if that was you, congrats. I don't know how many Tajik Beys are out there, but if that's you, congrats, man. That was huge. Got tagged in that. I think it's you. Hopefully it was. Hopefully I'm not talking on my ass, but if it was you, congrats there. Now let's keep it going. Appreciate that, Tajik. But yeah, Tajik is the GOAT. Huge supporter. And yeah, really do appreciate that quite a bit. So yeah, as far as this fight goes, this fight's awesome, man. I mean, probably one of the more interesting fights on the entire card, on a card that kind of sucks. I really am looking forward to this fight. If you're talking DraftKings, like this is probably like a must-own fight. You got to imagine these salaries are going to be pretty close as well, because Ronnie Lawrence has some extreme upside, to say the least. We talked about his takedown numbers. Have watched tape on Jones. He can be taken down for sure, but he is a black belt in BJJ, very good grappler, a solid get-up game. He can be stuck on his back at times, but, a good get-up game nonetheless. And on the flip side, Ronnie Lawrence, he's really good at getting takedowns. He's just not really good at really holding people down. That's kind of why you see him going out here and getting, 12 takedowns, getting 8, 9 takedowns as well. Interesting fight. And what's so interesting to me is, and you take a look at Trevin Jones in his career, like, where is this power coming from? Like, he is not considered a knockout artist. I think he has like 3 knockout wins in his entire career. And now he's going out here and knocking guys out. Like, where is this power coming from? Dan mentioned it. Is marijuana the new EPO? Because since he's started smoking, apparently he's been knocking out. He's knocked out Trevin Jones, or he knocked out Tamir Valiyev, and he knocked out Mario Batista. So very interesting there. But yeah, somebody mentioned in the chat, I don't want to really say Trevin Jones is knockout or bust, but that's kind of how I'm looking at it. I think Ronnie Lawrence will definitely be winning minutes of this fight with the takedowns, with some control time as well. And on the feet, like, I think Ronnie Lawrence striking is pretty good. He has a very good body kick. He really goes to the body well. I've seen him finish multiple people with a body kick. And guess who got really hurt by a body shot? It's Trevin Jones against Tamir Valiyev. So on the feet, I don't really think Ronnie Lawrence is, too far out there. I think he's a really, really good striker himself. It's just in this fight, he probably will once you get those takedowns. Man, this fight is so close. If I had to pick a side, I'll probably lean towards Ronnie Lawrence, because I do think he will be winning minutes of this fight. But could Trevin Jones make it 3 in a row? 3 in a row knockouts here? Potentially, but we'll take a look at the line. And I said it was a pick'em. I was thinking of a different fight. We actually have Ronnie Lawrence as a slight favorite, minus 135, closely lined nonetheless. And we have the comeback on Trevin Jones at plus 115. Yeah, I don't know. We'll take a look at the fight. Doesn't go to decision, sitting at minus 135. The fight goes to decision is minus 105. Not really any strongly in one way or another to me. Uncle Weezy, any thoughts on the Ronnie Lawrence line minus 135, or the fight goes or fight doesn't go?
Not really, man. I'm leaning Lawrence here because that he really has shown fantastic wrestling, and and wrestling and pace are two of the best things that you can put together in order for a guy to go out there and win rounds. Yeah, I mean, so, that's fantastic. It's a fantastic way to stack wins like flapjacks in this league. And then Jones showing the power. Will he find the power? Because will he be on the feet? I don't know. Will he find a submission from his back? I don't know. This is I can't wait for this fight, but I'm not leaning heavily either way on the money line or on the over-under on this one.
Yeah, I'm probably going to sit back and definitely see where that money line goes. But as far as the lean goes, I will be going with Lawrence. But hey, Trevin Jones has been getting it done, and he's been getting it done as a dog. So we'll take a look at another dono, Tajik Bey. There is only one Tajik Bey. I love it. Me. And yes, it was around a $9,000 win. I knew I saw it. I knew it was you. Congrats, man. That's awesome. Huge, huge, huge win on DraftKings for you. Enjoy that money, man. You definitely deserve it. You definitely are the GOAT. So we'll get to the next fight. Oh, my goodness. Wow. Interesting fight here, to say the least. Jin Yu Fry going against Ashley Yoder. We have Fry, who is 36 years old, 5'3", 65-inch reach. We have Ashley Yoder, who is 33 years old, 5'7", 69-inch reach. So the things we do got to talk about in terms of tail of the tape is Yoder is going to be 3 years younger. Jin Yu Fry is a 36-year-old 115er who is actually an atom weight. Like, she is very small for the division. And she's going to be at a 4-inch height disadvantage in Jin Yu Fry, and she's going to be at a 4-inch reach disadvantage as well. Take a look at the last couple of fights between the two. Jin Yu Fry is 2-3 in her last 5 fights. She made her UFC debut over Kay Hansen in a fight where a lot of nothing going on for the first round and a half. Kay Hansen finally gets a takedown in that second round, is able to get a lot of top control in that second round. And then when it comes to the third round, Kay Hansen gets it down to the mat one more time and then gets an armbar win. Next fight, she takes on Luma Lukmimi, who is also pretty small for the division, and she loses a decision there as well, and then beats Gloria de Paula, who is also on the main card for some reason, and she gets it done there. As far as Ashley Yoder, she beat Siri Kondo by unanimous decision. She lost to Randa Marcos by split decision. She lost to Livon Souza by unanimous decision. She beat Miranda Granger by unanimous decision, and then she just lost to Angela Hill by unanimous decision as well. And she is 2-3 in her last 5 fights. Yeah, interesting fight here. What do you have for us, Weezy, on this one?
Yeah, this is an interesting fight if you like watching paint dry. This is probably not an interesting fight. What I'm going to do is I'm going to power through this one, and we're going to get to the next one. So yeah, very, very similar on the experience numbers. Jin Yu Fry actually slightly more experienced overall. But Yoder more experienced in the UFC. She's fought more of her career at a much higher level. 60% of her pro fights have been at the UFC level, while for Jin Yu Fry, it's been about 20%. Neither one of these girls great finishers. A 30% overall finish rate for Fry, a 50% finish rate for Ashley Yoder. So in Ashley Yoder's 8 wins, she's got 4 submissions, but none of them have come in the UFC. She hasn't finished any wins in the UFC. And she's never been finished as well. While Jin Yu Fry, though, has been finished in half of her pro losses. So 2 of them by knockout and 1 of them by submission. So 3 of her 6 losses come inside the distance. Striking numbers here, pretty pathetic on both sides. We got 1.8 landed and 3.35 offered for Jin Yu Fry. Jin Yu Fry's fights have taken place about 42% of the time in control time positions, but she's still only averaging 4.38 significant strikes attempted per minute, very low volume. While Yoder lands 2.75 and absorbs 3.53, striking accuracy around 40% for both of them, striking defense around 45% of them for both of them. Jin Yu Fry has gotten 3 takedowns in 3 fights. Ashley Yoder has been the much more active wrestler as more of her fights take place in control time positions for and against. 32 takedown attempts in 9 fights for Yoder. She's gotten 12 of them. Jin Yu Fry, 83.33% takedown defense, but when she was taken down by Kay Hansen, she was submitted. Yoder's fought the tougher brand of competition over the years. Angela Hill a couple of times, Marcos. But we're just going to boil it down to what we actually have here. The advantages for Fry: slightly more experience as a pro, out-controls opponents 2-1 thus far, even though she hasn't fought great grapplers yet. With the exception of Kay Hansen, but Kay Hansen's very young. Decent wrestling when she goes to it, 3 for 7 on takedowns, 42.86%. Good defensive wrestling, defended 10 of 12 takedowns attempt, 83.33%. For Yoder is 3 years younger, 4 inches taller, and has a 4-inch reach advantage. Very big for this division. They call her the spider monkey because she's got a ridiculously long reach for this division. Probably got a 4-inch reach advantage over just about everybody in the division, if not more. She's got 6 more UFC fights, almost 100 more minutes in the UFC cage. She's a better finisher, 50% of the pro wins by sub. She's an active wrestler, 32 takedown attempts in 8 fights, 37.5% takedown percentage, 1.33 takedowns per 15 minutes. She's defended 15 of 22 takedowns attempts, so pretty good takedown defense. Out-controls opponents 31% to 24%, and she's faced the better competition: Mackenzie Dern, Angela Hill twice, Randa Marcos, Lavinia Souza, and Justine Kish. So, I'd probably go with Yoder here with not much confidence. I'm not betting this fight. I might not even watch it. But yeah, that's what I got for you, man. What do you got for me?
Yeah, I actually like Yoda here quite a bit, believe it or not. I mean, you talk about the tail of the tape here, especially. She's going to be 3 years younger, 36 years old at 115. Not really a good look there. And then also the 4-inch height and 4-inch reach advantage as well. She's going to be the much, much, much bigger fighter. And we kind of talked about it a little bit that when Frey gets taken down, she really has nothing off her back. Kay Hansen was able to get on top of her, land some ground and pound in that second round. And then in the third round, she took her down, armbarred her shortly after. Also saw some fights where she had been taken down and really has nothing to offer off her back. And Ashley Yoder, actually a pretty solid grappler. If she can get the fight down to the mat, I think she'll have a lot of success here. So I think that's a huge path to victory for Yoder. But if this fight somehow stayed standing for 15 minutes, I think Yoder's live there as well. And, Yoder's a really good grappler. Her striking's not that great, but take a look at these numbers by Jin Yu Fry. In the Kay Hansen fight, she lands 26 significant strikes in 2.5 rounds. In the Luma Luke Bumi fight, she lands 26 significant strikes in 3 rounds, 15 minutes. And then in the Gloria to Paula fight, a fight she won, she lands 24 significant strikes in 3 rounds, 15 minutes. She has absolutely no volume, only lands 1.79 significant strikes per minute with a 40% accuracy compared to Yoder, who low volume herself still lands a lot more, 2.75 significant strikes per minute with a 39% accuracy, factoring in that height, that reach as well. I think Yoder can honestly win it on the feet, although Fry is probably the better striker. It's just she doesn't throw anything. She doesn't throw anything at all. And then plus you factor in Yoder probably does go for takedowns. You mentioned the takedown numbers, which I really do like to see. She's attempted 32 takedowns in the UFC. I love that. And if she can get on top, I think it's going to be an absolute nightmare for Jin Yu Fry. I think she's going to get controlled. Don't know if she'll get submitted or not. She has been submitted a couple times in her career, but I really like this fight for Ashley Yoder. I hate to say it, but on this card, Yoder is one of my more confident picks on the entire card, to be honest. I don't think Fry is that great, to be honest. Low volume, very small for the division. I think it's a really good spot for Yoder. But at the end of the day, this is women's MMA. Anything can happen. But, man, I kind of like the spot for Yoder, to be honest. We'll take a look at the odds here. We have Yoder opening up as a minus 140 favorite, currently minus 136. The over or the fight goes to decision is juiced to the max, minus 305, because this fight is not getting finished. But I might take a look at maybe like an Ashley Yoder by decision prop. I don't know if I'll get there from the money line. But, yeah, I'm kind of liking Ashley Yoder this week.
Yeah, the decision prop would be the way to go if you're going to bet either of these girls, because Yoder, in all of her fights in the UFC, she's never been finished and she's never finished anybody. So, 9 fights, every single one of them has went to decision. So, yeah, the over, will be a good bet. The fight goes to decision should be a good bet. Neither one of these women is a prolific finisher. And even though Fry has been finished in 50% of her losses, we haven't seen Yoder finish anybody in the UFC. So, yeah, the over is probably a pretty good bet here, but I'm not touching the money line. But you make good points about Yoder. I think she's probably better everywhere. She's certainly more experienced. And, and if she gets on top of Jin Yu Fry, it'll probably look a lot like the Miranda Granger fight where Yoder had a lot of success. So, yeah, I could see Yoder winning this fight pretty easily, but I don't want the orderlies from 1-800-GAMBLER coming over here and put me in a straitjacket if I bet this money line. So, I got to be here next week. We got another Stat Diggers. I can't be in the padded rooms at 1-800-GAMBLER trying to, explain to them why I bet on the Jin Yu Fry Ashley Yoder fight, So I'm going to stay away, man. But, I do like Yoder here, actually.
Yeah, good point about the 1-800-GAMBLERs. So we'll get to the next fight, which actually should be a pretty exciting fight. We have Danny Chavez going against Kai Kamaka. Chavez is 34 years old. He has 5'8" with a 67-inch reach. Kai Kamaka is 26 years old, 5'7" with a 69-inch reach. Have not taped this fight yet. I still need to tape it sometime tonight, but just by looking at it, I think it's going to be a really good fight here. Danny Chavez had his UFC debut against TJ Brown in a fight where TJ Brown showed some of the worst fight IQ you've ever seen. TJ Brown, who is a wrestler, grappler, decided to stand with Danny Chavez for 15 minutes and obviously got beat there, which was a very good win for Chavez there. But, I thought TJ Brown fought like an idiot in that fight. And then in the next fight, I thought that people, really overrated Chavez after that performance, including me. I did pick Chavez against Jared Gordon, and Jared Gordon kind of did what I thought TJ Brown would do, and that's take down Chavez, get him down to the mat. And then he ended up losing that fight to Jared Gordon by unanimous decision. I thought there's a really good chance that Chavez would finish Jared Gordon, which Jared Gordon has been knocked out like 5 times. I think he's been knocked out in all his losses. So I was kind of thinking Chavez knocking on that fight. Didn't happen. Jared Gordon did fight smart and did get the win there. As far as Kai Kamaka, he made his UFC debut against Tony Kelly, which, man, that was one of the more exciting fights that I've seen. Tons and tons of volume, some wrestling mixed in as well. Kai Kamaka did slow down as the fight went on, and that's kind of the story about Kai Kamaka, not the best gas tank whatsoever. In his next fight against Jonathan Pierce, kind of got exposed a little bit. He looked good early on, but kind of got taken down multiple times by Jonathan Pierce, ended up gassing out and getting finished himself. And then in the next fight against TJ Brown, I had a bet on TJ Brown. I really thought Kai Kamaka won that fight. I even got up. I didn't even watch the decision get called because I knew for sure that Kai Kamaka beat TJ Brown, but I somehow was able to cash that bet, and I did not agree with that whatsoever. So I did think Kai Kamaka beat TJ Brown. His cardio did look a little bit better than it had, but yeah, very, very good fight here. What do we have for this one, Weezy?
Yeah, this is a good one, man. But, what's interesting here, starting off on the tail of the tape, is that Danny Chavez is 34, so he's getting up there in age a little bit here. We got an Kamaka's 8 years younger, got a couple inch reach advantage, which will be good for the boxing because Kamaka does have nice hands. We see Chavez is a little more experienced as a pro, 15 pro fights to 12, about 70 more minutes in the pro cage. I'd say about 2.5 more years as a pro for Chavez. So Kamaka's got some measurable advantages here. Chavez has definitely got some experience advantages. In terms of UFC experience, 3 fights for Kamaka, 2 for Chavez, around between 30 and 40 minutes of cage time for both of them. But if we go to the finish numbers, kind of interesting. Chavez hadn't finished anybody until before he got into the UFC. Then he knocked out 3 dudes in a row. So he does have 3 of his 11 wins coming by way of knockout, but that's only a 27% finish percentage. Very low at the UFC level. And then we go over to Kamaka, and we see that in his 8 pro wins, he's only got 1 win of those 8 coming inside the distance at 12.5% submission percentage. So this guy submitted somebody a long time ago on the regional scene. So he's not a finisher. Chavez hasn't shown any finishing chops either at the UFC level. So it's kind of interesting that both of these guys are not prolific finishers at all. A 25% sub rate in his losses. So only 1 of Chavez's 4 pro losses has been a finish, while for Kamaka, he has been finished in 2 out of his 4 losses. So if we add up the 8 losses for Kamaka and Chavez, a 37.5% finish rate against. If we look at the striking numbers, Chavez and Kamaka are both absorbing more than they land. Chavez lands 2.93, but he absorbs 4.17. And Kamaka is landing 5.63 and absorbing 6.26. So Kamaka's much more accurate at a 56% striking accuracy compared to only 39% for Chavez. And Kamaka's shown a little power. He does have a knockdown in the 222 significant strikes that he's landed. And if we look at the defense, it's almost identical. Neither guy has been knocked down, but we just see that Kamaka's fights, he's throwing 10 significant strikes per minute, and his opponents are throwing 13.61 significant strikes per minute. So Kamaka's fights thus far at the UFC have been high volume, while Chavez only throws 7.43 per minute, and his opponents throw 9. So his opponents are out-voluming him and outlanding him, and that's the same for Kamaka. His opponents are out-voluming him 13.61 to 10.03 and outlanding them 6.26 to 5.63. If we look at the grappling stats, both of these guys have been really good on their takedown attempts. Combined, they're 12 of 14 on takedown attempts. These guys almost got a 90% combined takedown percentage between the two of them. Danny Chavez is 5 for 5, 100% takedown percentage in the UFC, 2.5 takedowns per 15 minutes, and a 7.5% control time. But those 3 of those takedowns came against TJ Brown right at the end of the fight. I don't think he got any takedowns, and then he might have gotten 3 in the last minute and a half of the fight. But he got them when he shot for them. And then Kamaka, 7 of 9. So he's in his 3 fights attempted 9 takedowns and gotten 7 of them. He's averaging 2.66 per 15 minutes. He's getting 28.72% control time and only yielding 10% control time, while Chavez is only getting 7.5% control time, but getting controlled about 24% of the time. So Danny Chavez's opponents are out controlling him at about 3.5 to 1 ratio, while Kai Kamaka is out controlling his opponents at almost a 3 to 1 ratio. So if we see one of the paths to victory for Kamaka could be getting takedowns and controlling Danny Chavez. However, here's the thing. Danny Chavez has shown 85% takedown defense thus far in the UFC. His opponents have shot 13 takedowns in 2 fights, and they've only gotten 2 of them. So he has successfully defended 11 out of 13 takedown attempts. He's only getting taken down once per 15 minutes, but he is getting out-controlled by his opponents. And Kamaka has not shown good takedown defense, as he has only successfully defended less than half the takedown attempts against him, 5 out of 12, for 41.67% takedown defense and 2.66 takedowns allowed per 15 minutes. So even though Kamaka's been efficient getting takedowns, he has not been efficient in stopping them. So it kind of looks like whichever guy goes to the wrestling first could be potentially the one that wins the fight. But Chavez has shown much better takedown defense than Kamaka has thus far. And if we look at the strength of schedule, they've both fought TJ Brown. Kamaka lost via split decision. Chavez won via unanimous decision. So there's a little bit of MMA math there that says Chavez might have an advantage. But both of these guys have fought similar competition. I would say Kamaka, having fought TJ Brown, Jonathan Pearson, Tony Kelly, maybe a little bit tougher than Jared Gordon and TJ Brown, but it's a toss-up. So if I go to my notes here, we're going to talk about Kamaka's advantages being he's 8 years younger. He's got a 2-inch reach advantage. He's high volume and an accurate striker at 10 significant strikes attempted per minute and 56% accuracy. He's got excellent offensive wrestling, 7 of 9 on his takedown attempts, 77% takedown percentage, 2.66 takedowns per 15 minutes. And he's out controlling his opponents 29% to 10%, so his top control has been very good. And if we look at the Chavez advantages, he's slightly more experienced. He's got 3 more fights as a pro, 65 more minutes of cage time, 2.5 more years as a pro. And he's got excellent offensive and defensive wrestling in the UFC thus far. He's 100% on his 5 takedown attempts, and he's successfully defended 11 of 13 takedowns against him. And Kamaka has been taken down in 7 of 12 takedowns against. So, there could be a path to victory for Chavez with his wrestling here. Because Kamaka is got 41.67% takedown defense, and he's allowing 2.66 takedowns per 15 minutes. So, I see advantages for both of these guys. I think Chavez might have a little more power on the feet. Kamaka's probably going to throw more volume. But I think whichever guy goes to the wrestling first is going to be the one that has a better chance of stealing this decision, as I don't see this one finishing inside the distance.
Yeah, I thought something really interesting you noted was going to be the finish rates of the two. Kai Kamaka only a 13% finish rate, 0 by knockout, which kind of surprises me just based off the way he fights. He throws a ton of volume. It looks like he does hit hard, but those finishes have not came. And same thing for Chavez. A 20% finish rate for him, 27% by knockout. So this fight probably does go to decision. And we'll take a look at the odds here. And yeah, it's a very close fight. Line to pick him -110 each way. Open to pick them, and it's still a pick them right now. As far as the fight doesn't go, where the fight goes, we have no odds for that yet, but I'm assuming this fight more often than not probably does go the distance. And yeah, it's a tough fight to call. I kind of agree with what you said of whoever goes to those takedowns is probably going to have success. But we don't know really who's going to do that. Both guys can go out there and wrestle and get the fight down to the mat. I believe Danny Chavez is supposedly a black belt, which no submissions on his record, but I did see that he was a black belt, which is very interesting. And what I don't like about Kai Kamaka is that he does slow down as the fight goes on. So I still got to tape this one. If I had to do a lean, I'd probably lean Chavez because of the cardio issues of Kamaka. But this fight's going to be good. I think it's one of the better fights on the card, and I'm definitely looking forward to it.
Yeah, it's going to be a banger, man. These guys are both really good. Kamaka's just younger. Maybe he's hungrier at this point, but I think Chavez will be the one landing the more impressive strikes. He does hit hard. But yeah, it's really a tough one to pick. So I figure we just move on to the next one and see if we can find some more opportunities.
Yes, sir. Before I do so, we have about 200 in here. If you all can smash that like button for us, that'd be much, much appreciated. Just want to remind you guys, we go live every Sunday, 7:15 p.m. Eastern time, giving an early look on the next week's card. Which next week, after this week, I think it's UFC 265, right? So really looking forward to that one. That should be a great card. But we're here breaking down UFC Vegas 33, which, not the best card on paper, but we always say when we shit on cards, it always seems like they tend to deliver, and they tend to deliver with some violence as well. So although the card may not look the best, I feel like it could surprise a lot of us. I mean, I'm kind of expecting the worst, so I do think it will surprise me for sure. Probably surprise a lot of people as well. So I think it'll be okay. As always, we get to watch some fights on a Saturday. You can't really complain about that. So we'll get to the next fight here. We have Chris Grutzmacher going against Rafa Garcia. We have Grutzmacher, who is 35 years old, 5'8", 68-inch reach, going against Garcia, 26 years old, 5'7", 70-inch reach. So Garcia is going to have a 2-inch reach advantage and going to be at a 1-inch height disadvantage, but he will be 9 years younger than Chris Grutzmacher. As far as the last couple fights, Grutzmacher did lose by submission to Chaz Kelly. He did lose by submission to Daukaus, two really good grapplers there. He did knock out Joe Lozon. After that Lozon fight, he took like a really big layoff. I want to say it was like a 2.5 year layoff. Came back against Alexander Hernandez and looked like absolute shit and got knocked out in the first round. But he is 2-3 in his last 5 fights. Rafa Garcia, he did make his UFC debut against Nasrat Haqparast, lost by decision. Showed a ton of toughness in that fight. Like, this guy's tough. He's tough to put out for sure. He ate a lot of shots from Haqparast, but kind of a really tough test for Garcia to make his UFC debut against for sure. But he's definitely getting a winnable fight here against Grutzmacher. Part of that, to get into the UFC, he did beat Humberto Bantamweight, who I do believe was in the UFC prior to getting cut. So, yeah, interesting fight here. What do you got for us, Weezy?
Yeah, I don't know, man. This is a weird one, too. This is, Garcia in his second fight. He's fought some UFC veterans before getting to the UFC, guys like Esteban Payan and Humberto Bantamweight. And Grutzmacher, 35-year-old lightweight, great hands. Grutzmacher's got great hands. He really does box well. And if we look at Garcia's skill set, we can see in the finish stats for him, 64% sub rate, 9% knockout rate. So this guy's legit with his grappling. And one of the things that we'll notice with Grutzmacher is Grutzmacher's got 5 UFC fights and he has 0 takedown attempts. It's one of the best things that you can see, because hey, this guy, he's never even attempted a takedown in the UFC. It means what he wants to do is keep the fight standing and use his boxing. And he's not even really a kickboxer. He's pretty much a flat-out boxer. These guys are getting destroyed in the UFC now because boxers are always heavy on their lead leg, and they get their lead leg chopped up, and then they get knocked out. This is not a good time to be a boxer in the UFC. Unless you're somebody like Max Holloway or Calvin Kattar, and we even saw what Holloway did to Kattar. These guys that are pure boxers, they're just having a problem because they're not well-rounded enough in order to be able to survive in today's mixed martial arts. So Garcia being the better grappler here, getting 64% of his wins by submission, and I thought he gave a really good account of himself against Haqparast. He's a tough dude. So this fight, if it stays standing, Grutzmacher is going to be in really good shape. Grutzmacher's more experienced, 6 more fights, 70 more minutes in the cage, 6 more years as a pro, 4 more UFC fights, and about 30 more minutes in the UFC cage. Both of these guys finish about a little over 70% of their wins. Chris Grutzmacher has been finished in all 4 of his losses, though, while Garcia has only lost 1 fight, and it came by decision. So Grutzmacher's landing more strikes than he absorbs. He lands 7.02 per minute. That's really good, and only absorbs 5.54. He's got a 57% striking accuracy, a 55% striking defense. He's only been knocked down once in 247 strikes, while Garcia in only 1 fight showed a lot of volume, 14.47 strikes per minute, but he showed a pitiful striking accuracy of less than 25%. He's landing less than one out of 4 strikes. And he's getting doubled up. He landed 3.47, and his opponent, Haqparast, was landing 6.6. So he was a little bit out of his depth in that fight, took it on short notice as well. So neither one of these guys has gotten a takedown in the UFC. In their 6 combined UFC fights, they have no takedowns. In their 6 combined UFC fights, these guys have combined for less than 8% of control time, while Gritzenmacher has been controlled about 25% of the time. Gritzenmacher's takedown defense, not great, 62.5%. He's averaging being taken down more than 3 times for 15 minutes. And that's not surprising because the guy's a pure boxer. You know he's most comfortable on his feet, so why not just try to take him down? And since his takedown defense is less than 70%, if you just go to a heavily wrestling game, eventually you'll get him down. And then he's lost 75% of his pro losses have come by submission. So, there's definitely a path to victory here for Rafa Garcia. Take this dude down and submit him. And he's lost all 4 of his pro losses have come inside the distance. So, Garcia inside the distance bet could actually be a really good one here. But if you're on the Gritzenmacher side, you're hanging your hat on those nice hands of his. The fact that maybe he can stop takedowns because Rafa Garcia tried to take down Haqparast 3 times and was unsuccessful all 3 times. So maybe he won't be successful taking down Gritzenmacher. We'll see. Gritzenmacher should know that that's going to be the path to victory here. In terms of strength of schedule, I would say Gritzenmacher has fought the tougher dudes. If I go to my notes here, I would say that the advantages for Grits are that he's more experienced. He's got 6 more fights as a pro, 70 more minutes of cage time, 6 more years as a pro, 4 more UFC fights, 30 more minutes in the UFC cage. He's got a 71% finish rate as a pro. Accurate, crisp boxing, fast hands, 57.43% accuracy. That's excellent. Lands 7.02 significant strikes per minute and absorbs only 5.54. And he's fought the more experienced, tougher competition over his career. And if you're looking at Garcia, he's 9 years younger. That's big. He's got a 2-inch reach advantage. He's got a really nice submission game outside of the UFC, having 64% of his pro wins coming by sub. And Grits has only 62.5% takedown defense and has been out-controlled 25% to 5% in his UFC career. So there's a path to victory for Garcia using takedowns, top control, to win rounds potentially, or to even submit Gritzenmacher, where 3 of his 4 pro losses have come by submission. And Grits has given up 3.03 takedowns for 15 minutes. So he's definitely been taken down a lot. And Grits has absorbed a knockdown and 247 significant strikes against for 0.34 knockdowns allowed per 15 minutes. So, yeah, man, I think Garcia has some advantages here. He's much younger. He's the better grappler. I think Gritzenmacher is a little bit one-dimensional as a mixed martial artist. So I think I'm going to pick Garcia here. And I actually think that there's a good chance he gets it done inside the distance. What are you thinking here?
Yeah, I like Garcia quite a bit. I mean, I mentioned earlier, Gritzenmacher looked like complete dog shit against Alexander Hernandez. He looked horrible. He got knocked down in that first round. And I like Garcia. He's young. He's 26 years old. He's going to be younger by 9 years as well. Solid striking, but really good wrestling and really good grappling as well. And that's kind of where Gritzenmacher does struggle. You mentioned he has been submitted in 3 out of his 4 losses. I think it could be another submission win here for Garcia, who has finished 66% of his wins, 58% coming by submission. So, yeah, I do like Garcia. I think on the feet, it's going to be competitive for sure. I even favor Garcia on the feet at this point, but getting this down to the mat, I think he's going to have a ton of success. I mean, I just not like what I saw from Gritzenmacher off his back. Doesn't really have much to offer there, and I think Garcia is going to be able to pass position, get into very dominant positions, and maybe find a submission as well. So, yeah, I like Garcia, but, taking a look at the line, I don't really like the line. Garcia, I think on a card where a lot of these fights are very close, a lot of these fights are very sketchy, he's one of the guys that I'm more confident with as far as a pick goes. But you take a look at the line, man, minus 275 for Rafa Garcia, opening up minus 175, now minus 275. And we take a look at Gritzenmacher opening up plus 150, now plus 135. I mean, maybe if you could have gotten early, I think that's solid, but minus 275, I'm just not playing it. I mean, if you're into doing parlays, which I will have no parlays this week at all, maybe a decent parlay piece, as I do think he wins, but I might be looking at attacking this fight a little bit differently. So they have the fight goes to decision at minus 160, and the fight doesn't go to decision at plus 120. So you got to think that the over-under is going to be set at 2.5 rounds. might get plus money on that under. And like I mentioned, both guys really solid finishers. You have Garcia with a 66% finish rate, over half his wins coming by submission, and Grutzmacher a 71% finish rate, over half his wins coming by knockout. And again, Grutzmacher has been finishing all 4 of his losses. So I might be looking at maybe a fight doesn't go, maybe an under, or even Garcia inside the distance as well. I think could all be a solid spot to look at depending on the line.
Yeah, Garcia inside the distance, it might not be a bad look because that money line is just flat out too wide. You know, I mean, Rafa Garcia hasn't really beaten anybody that's so exciting that I would want to lay minus 250 against him, even though I'm really not high on Grutzmacher at this point. But yeah, I mean, Grutzmacher's more experienced. He's been around longer. He's fought tougher competition. I don't think I'd lay that on a money line, but I think if Garcia does get it done, he gets it done inside the distance. There's a very good chance of that. So maybe if you're on the Garcia side, that's how you get a little extra value in your bet. But yeah, that's too wide on the money line for me, though.
Yep, that's how I'm looking at it for sure. Maybe a violence bet to look at. So we'll get to the next fight here. We have Colin Anglin going against Melsik Bagdasaryan. I think I got that right. I got it right earlier. Is it Bagdasaryan, right?
Bagdasaryan, yep.
Got it, Bagdasaryan. Yep. There we go.
Very well. Yep.
So Anglin, he is 28 years old. He is 5'9", 71-inch reach. Going against Melsik, he is 29 years old, 5'9", 70-inch reach. So Anglin's going to be younger by 1 year, and then Anglin's also going to have a 1-inch reach advantage as well. Take a look at the last couple fights. Colin Anglin did win on the Contender Series by decision. He is 5-0 in his last 5 fights. And then as far as Melsik, he did win on the Contender Series against Dennis in a very good fight. I mean, not much tape on Melsik, but from what I was able to see, this guy is an absolute stud. He puts everything into every shot. I'm sure you're going to talk about it, but he's only been out of the first round, I believe, once, and it was that Contender Series fight. He did slow down, but he was still able to outland his opponent each and every round in that fight. And in that first round, man, did he look so good. He looks so good. So it's kind of a wrestler versus striker where Anglin's going to want to get this fight down to the mat. Melsik's going to want to keep this fight on the feet, try to knock him out. Actually kind of looking forward to this fight. I think both guys are pretty solid, but which way you lean, Weezy, and what do you got for the stats?
This is going to be a good one, man. This is definitely a clash of styles. I love breaking down these kind of fights. Anglin, a wrestler. Melsik Bagdasaryan is a ridiculous striker, dude. So Bagdasaryan has 6 professional fights. The 5 professional fights that he had prior to coming to the UFC were all first-round knockouts. And in those 5 fights, he spent 150 seconds in the cage. That was an average of 30 seconds per win for Melsik Bagdasaryan. And he just couldn't get Dennis Buzukja out of there. And so that was the first time we ever saw him go the distance. He really gassed out, but he put it on that dude in the first round. And he hits like a truck, dude. He hits so hard. If Anglin is not successful getting this fight to the ground, he's going to be hurt to the legs, to the body, and to the head. Anglin has had 9 pro fights. Bagdasaryan only 6. And then you look here, and even though it's only 3 more fights, 90 minutes of cage time for Anglin, only 17 and a half for Bagdasaryan, and 15 of those minutes came in 1 fight. So yeah, a 10-minute average fight time for Anglin, only 2.92 average fight time for Bagdasaryan. And Bagdasaryan's actually been doing this 3.5 years longer. He's had a 7-year and 3-month career, which is really interesting for a guy who's only had 6 fights. Very inactive in his pro career. Well, Anglin, is much more active, almost 4 years in the game and 9 pro fights. Both of these guys have 1 UFC fight. It was a Contender Series fight. They both won by decision. So Anglin in his career has got a 63% finish rate. Bagdasaryan, 80%. And then Bagdasaryan in his 1 loss, he lost by submission, while Anglin's only loss came by decision. And so we've got very limited striking numbers here, only 1 fight for each of these guys. Anglin landing 5.87, only absorbing 3.47, while Bagdasaryan landing 6.8 and only absorbing 3.8. So a 3 significant strike difference and almost a 2-to-1 ratio landing to absorb for Bagdasaryan. So both of these guys, very impressive debuts. Anglin used his wrestling in order to win, getting 3 out of 4 takedowns and amassing 30.44% control time, getting 3 takedowns in that fight. And his opponent was 0 for 4 on takedowns, so he's got 100% takedown defense thus far in the UFC. Out-controlled his opponent 30% to 11%. While for Baghdasaryan, he out-controlled his opponent 23.5% to 14%. Baghdasaryan was taken down twice in that fight. He's showing a 75% takedown defense, allowing 2 takedowns per 15 minutes. So Baghdasaryan's going to have to really work on that takedown defense, make sure he keeps this fight standing where he's going to be most comfortable, striking, hitting hard. And if he is successful keeping this fight on the feet and gets the looks that he wants with his kickboxing, he could easily finish Anglin in the first round because he's got that kind of power. And if Anglin fights smart, he's going to probably shoot a takedown in the first 15 seconds on this guy. And if he doesn't get it, he better get his back up against the fence, work him in the clinch, and then just chain wrestle, try to get that takedown over and over and over again. Even if you're not successful, you might take some of the sting out of those punches and kicks of Baghdasaryan. Maybe you can see the bell. This is going to be a hell of a fight. I can't wait for this. 2 young prospects, both below 30 years of age, both of them with a really eye-popping skill set. For Anglin, it's wrestling. For Baghdasaryan, it's ridiculous, really exciting kickboxing. Let me just go to my notes here. The advantages for Melsik that I would say are going to be that he's an excellent, powerful kickboxer. Finished his first 5 fights in a combined total of 2.5 minutes. He's a southpaw. Southpaws are very difficult to deal with. He's got excellent striking ratio, landing 6.8 and only absorbing 3.8. 75% takedown defense, so he has been tested in his UFC fight with a lot of takedown attempts, and he did handle it pretty well. And he outcontrols his opponents in that one fight sample size, 23.5% to 14.2%, despite the fact that his opponent shot 8 takedowns against him. For the advantages for Anglin are that he's got excellent wrestling. He's more experienced. He's got 9 pro fights to 6 and over 70 more minutes of cage time. Even though Melsik has been a pro for 3 years longer than Anglin. He's got excellent striking ratios in his one fight sample, landing 5.87 and absorbing only 3.47. And then we got 75% on takedowns, 3 of 4 for Anglin, 3 takedowns per 15 minutes and 30.44% control time, 100% takedown defense in his own right. So yeah, man. This is going to be a great fight. 2 young prospects, one with great wrestling, one with fantastic kickboxing, clash of styles. Which one of these guys is going to get their way, man? You tell me.
Yeah, it's a really good fight. England's going to want to shoot a takedown within the first 5 seconds. I mean, Melsik, he's a serious problem. He hasn't fought, I believe. So I think his last fight was like 2019 as well. So he's going to be making more improvements. And shout out to Billy in the chat. I believe Billy said it's going to be his biggest bet of the year on Melsik. He's talking about, if you follow him on IG, he's been doing daily drilling, getting up from takedowns for like 8 months now. Yes, that's what he needs to do for sure, especially in this fight. Because man, on the feet, I think he's going to give Anglin some serious problems. And every fight does start out on the feet. And as far as like his takedown defense, like I didn't think it was terrible. He did stuff. It was 6 takedowns on the Contender Series as well. Did get taken down twice, but did a pretty good job at getting back up. So yeah, I like this guy. It was nice to see him, go into the second and third round in an MMA fight. He did slow down, but like I said, he was still able to keep up the pace and still outland his opponent on the Contender Series. I think Melsik is a serious problem, man. I really like him in this fight. I think there's a very good chance he knocks out Anglin. Like Melsik hits so hard, and if he has made improvements, which you got to imagine he has in those 2 years since he's been off, I think he's a very good chance to not only win this fight, but win it in very dominant fashion as well. But yeah, if I'm Anglin, I'm shooting a takedown, and I'm not going to stop shooting takedowns until I get this down to the mat, because you do not want to stand with this guy. But as far as a pick and a lean, I'm going Melsik. I'm going Melsik by knockout here. As far as the line goes, we see that Melsik is going to be, if I can find it, a minus 148 favorite, opening up plus 140. My goodness. Imagine getting this guy as a dog, but immediately dropped down to minus 160. Went to minus 150. Is currently at minus 148. And as far as Anglin, opening up plus or minus 160 currently, plus 128. So the line did flip instantly, and I completely agree with it. If Melsik has made improvements with that takedown defense, and if he is able to keep us on the feet for periods of time, I think he's going to have a very good chance of finishing this fight. We'll take a look at the fight goes and the fight doesn't go. We have the fight goes to decision at minus 165. The fight doesn't go to decision at plus 125. So is plus money. You're assuming that the 2.5 is going to be set, or it's going to be set at 2.5 rounds. Maybe get some plus money on the under there. Taking a look at their finish rates, we see that England has a 63% finish rate, finishing half his wins by knockout. And Melsik has an 80% finish rate, finishing all 80% by knockout as well. And Melsik has been submitted in his only loss. And England has been lost by decision in his only loss as well. But yeah, I'm kind of strongly leaning on the Melsik side. And yeah, I don't know if I'm going to get there at the betting window. But maybe like the Melsik knockout proc could be something to look at as well. But yeah, kind of tempted. I see him minus 142 on FanDuel, see him minus 145 on DraftKings. But with all that said, England does have a path to victory, and that path to victory is, getting takedowns, getting control time. But again, every fight does start standing, and I think Melsik has a very good chance to get him out of here. But yeah, if England can get him to the second and the third round, because we saw Melsik slow down in that second and third round of the Contender Series. But we always talk about it, pushing a wrestling heavy game plan is going to be very taxing on England's cardio as well. So yeah, very good fight. I'm leaning Melsik, and I'm probably leaning Melsik by knockout as well.
Yeah, this is going to be so great. I can't wait. I really do have to tape these guys. I know Bagdasarian's tape will take me less than 20 minutes to get his entire career, which is lovely. It was like watching Randy Costa last week. Such a pleasure to tape fighters like that. But I need to take these guys. I need to see England's wrestling. I need to see how relentless he is with his wrestling. How and when he gets takedowns, how much is he controlling his opponents? Because that's going to be just crucial here. If he wants to win this fight, Melsik Bagdasarian's feet better not be on that canvas. His back better be on the mat, or his back better be on the cage, because that's the only way he's going to be able to stay safe for 15 minutes from this killer.
Yeah, for sure. Saying Melsik fought September 2020. Oh, my bad. I thought it was 2019. So there we go. Tajik donation here. Please do not bet on Lawrence this week. I don't think I will. So appreciate the Tajik. Appreciate the dono as always. So let's get to the next fight here. And we have, oh my goodness, Nico Montano going against Yanan Wu. We have Montano, who is 32 years old, 5'5", 65-inch reach. Yanan Wu is 25 years old, 5'8", 66-inch reach. Montano is going to be 7 years older. She's going to have a 3-inch height disadvantage, and she's going to have a 1-inch reach disadvantage as well. Taking a look at the last couple of fights, Montano did win a decision over Shanna Dobson. After that fight, won by knockout, lost by decision against Julia Vila, won by decision against Roxanne Modafferi, and then lost by decision against Juliana Pena, which was a very close competitive fight. As far as Yanan Wu, it did win by knockout, lost to Gina Mazzani by decision, submitted Lauren Mueller, and then lost to Mizuki Inoue by split decision in a fight where I believe she outlanded Inoue by like 20-30 strikes, which is pretty crazy. Still lost that. And then lost to Jocelyn Edwards by decision as well. What do you have for us here, Weezy?
Let's try to get through this one real quick, huh? So we got Wu with about twice as much experience, despite the fact that she's only been in the game about 2 years longer. Nico Montano, only 7 pro fights. It's weird. It feels like she's been around a long time, but she just doesn't fight much. Not an active fighter by any stretch of the imagination. Only 2 UFC fights, and I'm not even sure. I'm going to look at the advanced stats here and kind of just take a look and see when was the last time Nico Montano even fought, because it's been a minute. I know that fight against Pena was a good fight, and she fought very well, but we just haven't seen much of her. That was 2019. That was July 13th, 2019 that we saw Nico Montano. And before that, in her win against Roxanne Modafferi, she won in December of 2017. So since December of 2017, we're talking almost 5 years now. She's only fought twice. So this is not an active fighter by any stretch of the imagination. Went on twice as many pro fights, twice as many UFC fights. Yanan's a good finisher, 18% by sub, 64% by knockout. She's got to win. She's got to win by submission in the UFC over Princess Tiger, Lauren Mueller. But other than that, it's been 3 decisions. So she was crushing cans prior to coming to the UFC, and then since then she has actually finished her only win in the UFC, but all 3 of her losses have come by decision. While for Montano, 1 win, by knockout, or 2 wins by knockout, but she's only got 7 professional fights and only 4 wins. So, God, yeah, 5.6 landed, 4.43 absorbed for Montano, 4.51 landed, 4.82 absorbed for Yinan. So better ratios for Montano, a little bit better accuracy for Yinan. Better striking defense, though, for Montano. 64% striking defense compared to 52% for Yinan. So Montano will probably be a little bit better defensively, and she throws more volume. When we look at the grappling stats, Wu Yinan 22% on her takedown attempts, Montano about 55% on her takedown attempts. So really good. 2.25 takedowns per 15 minutes. She gets 31% control time, does Montano, and only yields 19%. While for Yinan, she gets 19% control time, but yields 21.33. Yinan's takedown defense, not great, 66.67%. Montano's takedown defense, just a little under 70%. Montano has fought the much better level of competition, having fought Juliana Pena, who's going to be fighting for a title, Roxanne Modafferi, and Julia Avila, while Yinan has been fighting the lower level of the division with Jocelyn Edwards, who's new, Mizuki Inoue, who's already cut, Lauren Mueller, who's cut, and Gina Mazzani, who's 2-5 in the UFC. So if I go to my notes here, I would say that the advantage is for Montano, 64% striking defense, excellent striking ratios. She's landing more than she absorbs. She's a solid grappler, 54.55% takedown percentage is really good. She's getting 2.25 per 15 minutes, and she's getting 31% control time and only yielding 19% control time. So she's comfortable in the grappling realm, and she's comfortable in the striking realm. And she kind of goes back and forth between both pretty well. She's defended 9 of 13 takedowns against for almost 70% takedown defense, and she's fought the tougher competition, Avila, Pena, Modafferi. While for Yinan, she's 7 years younger. So you'd be betting on the younger fighter with a 3-inch height advantage and a 1-inch reach advantage if you were on Wu here. She's got twice as many pro fights, so she's much more active as a pro. And we got a good finisher. She's 82% finish rate, but most of that was against Chinese cans. And she's got decent takedown defense, 10 of 15 defended for 66.67%. This is going to be a stinker. I'm picking Montano. But yeah, 1-800-GAMBLER up on the screen for a reason. I am not betting this fight.
Yeah, I haven't really taped this one yet, but kind of looking through the stats and all of that, I think a big advantage is going to be Montano getting this down to the mat. I mean, Gina Mazzani was able to take down Yinan Wu and had 5 times took her down, had 8 minutes and 12 seconds of control time. And you mentioned the level of competition, huge disparity there. The ground game as well, I think is going to be a big disparity as well. But do I really want to lay nearly minus 200 on Nika Montano? No, I do not, because not only does she have to win, but you don't know what the hell the judges are going to be looking at. And you know damn well this is going to decision. So minus 200, no thank you. I do see her minus 180 on Bet Online. She did open up minus 225, so some money's actually coming in on Yinan Wu for some reason. I think Montano wins. I got to tape it. But yeah, you're not going to catch me betting on this fight. No way. No way am I laying minus 180 on Nika Montano here. The fight goes to decision is obviously going to be juiced. It is minus 285. The fight doesn't go is plus 205. This probably does go to decision. But yeah, I like Montano here first look. Still got to tape it, but don't see myself really betting this fight either way.
Yeah, me neither, dude. If I find out you did, I'm sending the orderlies over, man. I got them on speed dial, dude. You overpowered them last time, but I'll send more. Don't bet on this. And that goes for everybody watching, too. Don't let your Uncle Weezy catch you betting on this one.
Yeah, I mean, I bet on Hugh, the one fight. Remember that? We're talking about it. Sadly, we're not going to see the fight play out. But yeah, you won't catch me betting on this one. So won't need to send him over, Weezy. Don't worry. All right, next we have Niklas Stolze going against Mounir Lazzez. We have Stolze, who is 28 years old, 6'1", 74-inch reach, going against Mounir Lazzez, 33 years old, 6'1", 76-inch reach. I remember Lazzez was everybody's favorite parlay piece. I believe it was either earlier this year or late last year. Everybody's favorite parlay piece in Lazzez. He just came off of a huge win. Everybody thought he was the real deal, and then he gets knocked out in the first round in like the first minute by Warley Alvey, where he just started spamming body kicks and hurt him really, really bad. I believe that was the first time that Lazzez had been knocked out as well, which really shocked me because prior to that, He won a decision over Abdurakhimov Al-Hassan, where Al-Hassan unloaded the clip in that first 2.5 minutes. He gassed himself out. I remember he was like gassed out at the 2 minute and 30 second mark of that first round. But Lazzez showed a great durability. He showed, good cardio as well. And he showed that he had a lot of tools on his feet. I really like Lazzez's striking. He really mixes it up well. Great body kicks, great leg kicks, throws elbows as well. I like the guy. But yeah, he did really drop the ball against Warlley Alves. Definitely not a good look there. So he is 3-2 in his last 5 fights. As far as Niklas Stolze did make his UFC debut, I believe, against Ramazan Emeev. Pretty competitive fight. Emeev was able to take him down here and there. I believe Stolze was able to get a takedown as well. The striking was pretty competitive also. But yeah, very interesting fight here. What are you looking to hear for the stats on this one, Weezy?
Yeah, okay, so we got Stolze being a little bit more experienced here. We got Lazzez with a 2-inch reach advantage. He's a switch stance fighter, is Stolze, so he could be confusing Lazzez a little bit. Four more fights for Stolze as a pro, about 50 more minutes in the cage for Stolze. But Lazzez has been doing this about 2 years longer. Lazzez, 2 fights at the UFC level, only 1 for Stolze. If we look at the finish rates, we see that Lazzez is a very talented kickboxer. He's not submitting guys. He's knocking them out, So we got 10 wins for Mounir Lazzez in his career, 8 of them coming by knockout, 2 of them coming by decision. While for Stolze, we've got 4 of his wins have come by way of knockout, and 5, I believe, have come by way of submission. So we've got 9 out of his 12 wins have come inside the distance. So a 75% finish rate for Stolze, an 80% finish rate for Lazzez, but Stolze is the more diverse finisher as he gets submissions 42% of the time and knockouts 33% of the time, while Lazzez is a little more of a one-trick pony, just knocking dudes out. If we look at the stats here, we've only got 1 fight sample size for Stolze, and Stolze was really controlled by Ramazan Emeev. Emeev took him down 4 times and controlled him for 45% of the fight. So we see some pretty low numbers. It's hard to get off a lot of volume, when you're controlled 45% of the fight. So 2 significant strikes a minute 4, 1.93 against for Stolze, while we see Lazzez with his fights taking place a little bit under 50% of the time in control time, which is also the same for Stolze. A lot more volume for Lazzez at 10.18 offered, 5.69 landed, only 4.78 absorbed. So a 55, almost 56% striking accuracy for Lazzez here, while it's only 42% for Stolze in the small sample size. Stolze's defense a little bit better at 56%, but once again, it's a small sample size. Lazzez has been knocked down by a body kick, Stolze hasn't. Both of these guys 100% on their takedowns. Stolze 1 for 1, Lazzez 4 for 4, 3.41 takedowns per 15 minutes for Lazzez. Very interesting because we think of him more as a kickboxer, but he's gotten 31% control time and only yielded 17%. So very good. If we look at Stolze's takedown defense, he had 12 takedowns shot by Ramazan Emeev against him. He only successfully defended 8 of them. So he was taken down 4 times and controlled about 7 minutes of that fight. So, almost 2 minutes of control time per takedown attempt against. While Lazzez has successfully defended 60% of the takedowns against him, he's been taken down 1.71 times for 15 minutes, and he's been controlled about 17% of the time. Stolze's only UFC opponent, Ramazan Emeev. Lazzez's 2 opponents, Warlley Alves, Abdurakhimov Al-Hassan. So they've both fought tough competition at this level. Prior to coming into the UFC, Lazzez has a win over Sasha Palatnikov. I see Lazzez probably being the better striker here. I see Stolze maybe being the more well-rounded mixed martial artist, but both these guys can shoot takedowns. Both these guys can strike. I think Lazzez is going to be the better striker. I'm not exactly sure how Stolze is going to win this fight. I need to go back and watch tape on him. But we do know that he's a little more diverse in terms of how he finishes fights. So I would say that the advantages for Stolze in this spot are that he's 5 years younger. He's a switch stance fighter, so he might be able to confuse Lazzez by giving him some different looks. He's slightly more experienced, 4 more pro fights, 55 more minutes in the cage. He's a solid, diverse finisher, 75% overall, 42% by KO, 33% by submission. Lazzez has only shown 45% striking defense, so he's hittable. And Stolze has never been finished in his entire career. While for Lazzez, he's got a 2-inch reach advantage. He's an excellent kickboxer with KO power and finished 8 of his 10 wins by KO. And he's outlanding and outvoluming his opponents, landing 5.69 significant strikes and only absorbing 4.78. So, yeah, it's an interesting stylistic matchup. I need to take a longer look at Stolze to kind of figure out what he's going to bring to the table here. But this is a pretty close fight in my eyes. How are you seeing it? You're muted, dude.
Oh, my bad. Okay, we're back. Yeah, Stolze does have apparently a kickboxing background, but what really surprised me was going to be the ground game of Stolze. And this guy gets taken down a lot. I watched a couple of his fights. He gets taken down so much, but his ground game is really good. He attacks with submissions, 42% submission rate. So I do think Lazzez could take him down, but I don't know if he really wants to do that. I think Lazzez is going to want to stay on the feet. At that point, I agree with you. I do think Lazzez is going to be the better striker, more diverse with his striking, mixes it up very, very well. But yeah, this fight is competitive. We take a look at the line, and it definitely doesn't indicate that, where we have Lazzez opening up a minus 125 favorite, which I kind of agree with that line a little bit more. He's currently minus 200. And then we have Stolze opening up plus 105, is currently plus 170. So money coming in on Lazzez early. I will lean with Lazzez because I do think this fight is primarily going to play out on the feet. But yeah, I think the striking exchanges are going to be pretty close. But I'll lean Lazzez ever so slightly. But yeah, I think that line's off just a tad for sure. Fight goes to decision is minus 170. Fight doesn't go to decision is plus 170 or plus 130. Really no strong lean there either way. But I'll go with Lazzez, but minus 200 seems a little bit too steep for me personally.
Agreed. Yeah. I mean, Lazzez was fighting in Brave, I believe, or maybe UAE Warriors. He fights out of Dubai, and he's, there's a lot of good fighters coming out of that, area of the world right now. A lot of them coming out of Central Asia and North Africa. And, and he was doing really well on that scene. And, after getting that win over Abdurakhimov Al-Hassan, he was a huge favorite coming into his last loss against Worley. So, I think some people are still really high on Lazzez here, even though he had a little setback in his last fight. But this guy Stolze, he's younger. He seems to be a little bit more diverse, and I think it's going to be an interesting fight, man. But I can't really pick a side here. I wouldn't lay the minus 200 on Lazzez here, though. With that line, I'd be much more likely to put my money on Stolze, but I still have to take a much longer look at both of these guys.
Yeah, what's interesting to, I guess, mention was how good Lazzez did look against Abdurakhimov Al-Hassan. It's just, Al-Hassan, I don't think he's, the same Al-Hassan he was a couple of years ago. I don't think he's that great anymore. I don't know if Al-Hassan's cut yet, but he very well could be getting very close to being cut at this point. So although Lazzez looked very impressive as a big dog, I just don't know if Abdurakhimov Al-Hassan is the same Al-Hassan we saw, 3-4 years ago, So I don't know if we can look into that matchup all that much, but yeah, he looked really good in that fight. And then the next fight, he did, of course, drop the ball against Worley Alves. So yeah, a competitive fight, probably a dog or pass situation from the betting window, but you probably won't see me betting on this fight either way. So getting to the next fight, I believe this is where we start the main card. We have a Bryan Barberena versus Jason Witt, probably a very easy fight to break down here. We have Barberena, who is 32 years old, 6 foot, 72-inch reach, going against Jason Witt, who is 34 years old, 5'10", 70-inch reach. And, Jason Witt is somebody who I usually like to joke about, saying he has one of the worst chins I've ever seen because, man, this guy's chin is so bad. He's been knocked out a handful of times. He gets hurt, and, basically every single exchange, everything that touches his chin, this guy gets hurt. He goes down, and he's up there in contention with Malcolm Gordon for pound worst chin. And I think Malcolm Gordon kind of redeemed himself a little bit. And I think Jason Witt now holds the record for the worst chin in the UFC. I mean, this guy's chin is so bad, but kind of got me thinking, like, what if Jason Witt comes in here with the game plan of the Malcolm Gordon game plan of coming in here, shooting a takedown right away? It could be a little bit of closer fight than the line indicates, but we'll take a look at the last couple fights. We have Bryan Barberena lost to Leon Edwards by decision. No shame in that. He knocked out Jake Ellenberger. He lost to Vicente Luque by knockout. No shame in that, which, by the way, that was probably one of the best fights I've ever watched in my life. That fight was phenomenal. He knocked out by Randy Brown. Then he took a little bit of a layoff. I believe he had some type of surgery, maybe a back surgery, came back against Anthony Ivy. He was taken down 4 times in that fight, which you do not like to see. He also was controlled for a lot in that fight as well. As far as Jason Witt made his UFC debut against Takashi Sato, I believe that was on short notice, gets knocked out in the first round. Then he wins by submission against Cole Williams. A very good performance there, but Cole Williams, not the best fighter in the world, and then gets knocked out by Matt Semmelsberger. I believe it was like the very first punch that landed from Semmelsberger. So, yeah, very, very interesting fight here. Kind of a striker versus grappler here, where Witt's going to want to get this fight down to the mat as early as possible before Bryan Barberena finds his chin. But very interesting matchup. Pretty much a pretty easy one to break down. But which way you leaning here, Weezy? What do you got for the stats?
Yeah, I'm leaning Barberena here, but, Witt's 2 years older, Barberena 2 inches taller. Barberena got a couple inches of reach. Barberena, the southpaw here, training out of MMA Lab, and Jason Witt over there at Gloria MMA. And boy, our guy James Krause over there doing some fantastic jobs, coaching up these fighters. We got Barberena and Witt both very experienced here. 22 pro fights for Barberena, 25 for Witt. About 60 more minutes in the pro cage for Barberena. A little bit shorter average fight time for Witt. And Barberena's been doing it about 3 years longer. But Barberena's definitely had half of his pro career has been at the UFC level, while for Jason Witt, it's just over 10% of his UFC career or of his pro career that's at the UFC level. So, we're talking about 120 more minutes in the UFC cage for Barberena. So a significant high level experience advantage for Barberena compared to Witt. If we look at how these guys finish fights, Barberena finishing at an 80% rate overall, 67% by knockout, 13% by sub. And then we've got a 44% sub rate for Witt and a 17% knockout rate. So a 61% overall finish rate for Jason Witt in his pro career. In his only UFC fight, he finished by submission, while 67%, 2/3 of Bryan Barberena's UFC wins have come inside the distance. But Jason Witt has been finished in 100% of his pro losses, 29% by sub, 71% by knockout, and that is 7 losses. And if we add up Barberena's stats, we see that he's got a 41% finish rate. So in these guys' 14 combined losses, 10 of them have come inside the distance. So that's a pretty good number right there. You're talking about, almost 75% chance that this thing probably finishes inside the distance, just because Witt's so chinny, and Witt, every time he loses inside the distance. And Barberena is the favorite here, and he's an 80% finisher in his own right. So I'm going to be taking a long look at the fight doesn't go to decision for this one. If we look at the striking stats, we see that Barberena lands more than he absorbs, 5.48 to 4.7. He's got a 48% striking accuracy, a 45% striking defense. He knocks down his opponents more than he gets knocked down. While for Witt, he's landing 3.16, only absorbing 2.68. He's got a 65% striking accuracy, but you were mentioning he's probably the most chinny guy in the UFC. Somebody in the chat earlier said Jason X Witt, the Malcolm X Gordon, but the number right here that we're looking at for Jason Witt is a 9.09 significant strikes, knockdowns per total significant strikes. So this guy has only absorbed 22 strikes in the UFC, and he's been knocked down on 2 of them. So, that's almost a 10% chance that if you hit this guy, he goes down. So, 3.65 knockdowns allowed per 15 minutes and a 29% striking defense, as he has been hit on 22 of the 31 strikes thrown against him. So Jason Witt's got a problem with being hittable, and he's got a problem with being chinny. And Barberena is definitely a guy who's knocking out 2/3 of his wins. 10 of his 15 pro wins have come by knockout. So there's definitely a path to victory here for Bryan Barberena, using his boxing, his kickboxing, landing a big shot on Jason Witt. But if we get to the grappling stats, we know that Jason Witt's a good wrestler. He's got 44% of his pro wins by submission. And we saw that top game in that wrestling in the Cole Williams fight. Now, Cole Williams is probably one of the worst UFC fighters that has ever been on the roster. He only had 2 fights in the UFC. He missed weight both times by like 5 pounds and got his ass shaved in both performances. So, it's not like that's a big win or anything, but we saw what Jason Witt looks like when he goes to his wrestling and he uses his top game. So that is a possible path to victory for him here. We see that Witt is 50% on his takedowns, 3 fights, 4 takedown attempts. He's averaging 3.65 takedown attempts per fight. But look at this. In his time in the UFC cage, he's gotten 76.88% control time. Now, that's all in the Cole Williams fight. But he dominated that fight from pillar to post using his wrestling. That's how he wins this fight. Because Bryan Barberena has only successfully defended 36 of 60 takedown attempts against him. So he's only got a 60% takedown defense, and he's being taken down 2.76 times per 15 minutes. And he's been controlled 25% of his UFC career, while only controlling his opponents 11% of his UFC career. So Barberena has shown a propensity to be out-controlled by his opponents. And right now, Jason Witt, when he's not getting knocked out, he's out-controlling his opponent 77% to 2%. So, you know, that is a way for Witt to win this. If he goes to his wrestling early and often, gets good takedowns, and can keep Barberena on his back, there is a chance he can win a couple rounds here and get out of this one with a win. But if he's unsuccessful doing that, if the conditioning isn't there, if he's not able to chase that offensive wrestling for the entire 15 minutes, you got to believe it's just a matter of time before Barberena gets to him and sleeps him. So, yeah, I'm going to definitely pick Barberena here, but I think there is a path to victory for Witt, you know, with his wrestling. If you're betting Witt, you're hoping that this guy wrestles early and often and uses that top control game in order to land some ground and pound and win rounds. And with Barberena, you're hoping that his takedown defense is a little bit better than 60% this time around, that he kind of stays on the outside, uses his boxing, lands shots, and uses that experience advantage that he has, having fought tougher competition, and uses those hands that he's knocked out quite a few dudes with to check Jason Witt's chin and get the win here. So, yeah, I'm leaning on Barberena here. I think there's a path to victory for Witt, but I think the more likely scenario is that Barberena knocks him out.
Yeah. Just a fun fact, in the 5 fights in the UFC that Barberena has been taken down, he is 3-2, and his 2 losses are against one Colby Covington, who took him down 12 times, and Leon Edwards that took him down 3 times. The other 3 times where he was taken down at least once, he won all 3 of those fights. The last one being Anthony Ivey, which I don't like this. I don't like that Ivey did take him down. He took him down 5 times. He took him down 5 times, and he also controlled Barberena for 5 minutes and 50 seconds. But yeah, you do see Barberena's takedown defense. It is sitting at 60%, mostly because Colby Covington did take him down 12 times. But I didn't really like seeing Ivey being able to have success taking him down. So, like you mentioned, there is a path to victory for Jason Witt. I just think that at some point, Jason Witt's going to get knocked out here. Jason Witt, he needs to go to his wrestling right away. And that's just not something he does. He likes to get into these brawls, which makes absolutely no sense because he has no chin to really, do that. So he is training at Gloria MMA and fitness with James Krause, but that did not help him in his last fight where he got knocked out in 16 seconds against Matt Semmelsberger. But yeah, I like Barberena here quite a bit. Don't know if I'll get there at the money line, to be honest. It is sitting at minus 260, open at minus 200. Jason Witt opened up plus 170, plus 220. I don't know about the money line or putting him in a parlay because Jason Witt, if he does go for takedowns right away, it could be a competitive fight. More so looking at the Barberena inside the distance, the Barberena by knockout prop. The fight doesn't go to decision, which is sitting at minus 155. So I'm assuming the over-under is going to be set at 2.5 rounds. Maybe you get close to even money on the under 2.5, but I'm kind of thinking violence here. Barberena, very, very good finisher, 80% finish rate. Witt has never lost by decision. Crazy to think about. Witt in 25 fights has never, ever lost by decision. 7 finish losses, 5 by knockout, 2 by submission. So, yeah, all that adds up to me is going to be either a potential violence bet under 2.5, fight doesn't go to decision, or a potential Bryan Barberena KO prop. So, yeah, very interested in that.
Yeah, and let me just add, you were talking about the Anthony Ivey fight. Anthony Ivey attempted 24 takedowns against Bryan Barberena. So he got 5 of them, and he did get some control time. But it's important to note, that we're seeing what Witt's path to victory is here, and that is going for takedowns early and often. Well, in his last fight, Barberena fought a guy that's going to be a lot like Anthony Ivey. Ivey's a better submission grappler, and Witt's more of a wrestler and a top control guy. But, he just saw 24 takedown attempts in his last fight. He's going to be ready for what he sees coming out of Jason Witt. And if Jason Witt decides to do what he did in the last fight and try to knock out Barberena, it probably won't work. It'll probably work exactly the way it did last time with Witt looking up at the lights here. So yeah, I think Barberena is going to be ready for this game plan here. And I don't think Witt has 24 takedown attempts in him in this fight. And you know, even though Ivy attempted 24, Barberena still got that win. And he still got the win via unanimous decision, outlanding him 63 to 36, and he had 175 total strikes in comparison to 54. So Barberena will probably be ready for this game plan. I think he gets it done here.
Yeah, true that. And like in general, like Barberena's his get-up game is really good. Underrated ground game as well. So yeah, I think he'll be prepared. I think he'll be fine. But yeah, I'm really looking at probably Barberena inside the distance. I think it's probably a really good play this week. But we do got a dono. Don't ask, don't tail. $10 dono. Appreciate that. He says, I'm fired up and ready for Saturday. I am as well, as fired up as you can be for a card like this. But yeah, I'm ready to make money. I love being able to talk it through Uncle Weezy and you guys in the chat as well, finding some spots for this upcoming card. Going through the card, I mean, it's not as bad as you thought, right, Weezy? I mean, this card is not terrible. There are some good fights. There are some crappy fights as well, but I think there's some solid fights on the card. I think there's going to be some violence as well, and as always, we get to watch fights. So yeah, appreciate the donation. Don't ask, don't tell. Really do appreciate that. Does go a long way for sure. So we'll get to the next fight here. We have Rani Yahya going against Kang Ho Kong. We have Kang, who is 33 years old, 5'9", 73-inch reach, going against Rani Yahya, who is 36 years old, 5'6", and a 67-inch reach there. So some things to note, we have Rani Yahya, who is a 36-year-old bantamweight. He's going to be at a 3-inch height disadvantage. He's going to be at a 6-inch reach disadvantage as well. Taking a look at their last couple of fights, Kang, a submission win over Guido Canetti, a split decision loss over Ricardo Ramos, a submission win after that, a split decision win after that, and 2 split decision wins after that as well. So he has 4-1 in his last 5 fights as far as Rani Yahya. A submission win, and then a submission win over Luke Sanders as well. Decision loss over Ricky Simone. A majority decision against Enrique. Majority decision draw, my bad, against Enrique Barzola, and then just got a submission over Ray Rodriguez. He is 3-1-1 in his last 5 fights. Very, very intriguing and interesting fight here where we have Kang, who is typically wanting to get the fight down to the mat. Solid wrestler, very solid grappler as well. But will he want to go down to the mat with Rani Yahya, one of the best grapplers in the division? So very intriguing fight here. What do you have here in terms of the stats, Weezy?
Yeah, you know, so Yahya only 3 years older than Ho Kong here, which is interesting. Ho Kong's got 3 inches of height, and he's got a 6-inch reach advantage here. So I think that's huge. A 6-inch reach advantage for Ho Kong, if he does use his striking, could be something that he could use in order to win a striking battle here. But what's interesting about Ho Kong is that if we look at his UFC career, he's definitely using his grappling in order to get wins, not his striking. So how comfortable will Ho Kong be trying to use his striking in this fight? We're going to find out. Yahya, the more experienced fighter, the older fighter, 39 professional fights for Rani Yahya, 26 for Ho Kong, 17-8 with a no contest for Ho Kong, 27-10 with a draw and a no contest for Yahya. So we got about 120 more minutes of cage time for Rani, maybe 130, and about 4 more years in the game. Both of these guys, look, you got Rani Yahya, who's 36, who's been in the game about 19 years. So he probably started fighting when he was about 17 in Brazil. While for Ho Kong, he's got a 14-year career, and he's only 33 years old. So he started fighting when he was 18 or 19. So both of these guys have been fighting since they were kids. In terms of UFC experience, Yahya much more experience. He's got 18 UFC fights, while Ho Kong only has 9. Both of these guys have got really good records, though, in the UFC. 6-2 with a no contest for Ho Kong, 12-4 and a draw with a no contest for Yahya. About 80 more minutes in the UFC cage and an average fight time below 13 minutes for both of them. If we look at how these guys finish fights, 77% finish rate for Ho Kong, 78% finish rate for Yahya. Both of these guys finish fights via submission. So 65% sub rate for Ho Kong, 12% by knockout, while all 78% of the finish rate for Rani Yahya comes by submission. And then if we look at the losses, we see that in the 10 losses for Yahya, he's only been finished in 3 of them, 20% by knockout, 10% by sub. And for Ho Kong, 12.5% finished rates in his 8 losses. So only 1 by knockout, only 1 by submission. So 75% of Ho Kong's losses have come by decision, and 70% of Yahya's losses have come by decision. So right there, it gets me thinking that this is probably a pretty good candidate that this fight actually does go to decision. Now, if we look at the striking stats, we see that neither one of these guys is putting up decent striking numbers because they grapple first and they're constantly going for takedowns and using their ground game. Neither one of these guys lands 3 strikes a minute. Ho Kong is landing 2.52 and only absorbing 2.43, while Yahya is only landing 1.76 and he's absorbing only 1.63. Ho Kong a little bit better defensively. Yahya a little bit more likely to get knocked down than Ho Kong, and Ho Kong showing some power at 0.7% knockdowns per total significant strikes landed. So I would say that that would put him at 2 knockdowns and 284 significant strikes landed. That's not bad. And then we look at the grappling stats. This is where it's really interesting for both of these guys. Ho Kong, 19 out of 32 on his takedown attempts. 60% success on his takedown attempts. That's really fantastic. He's getting 2.53 per 15 minutes. He's getting 1.06 submission attempts per 15 minutes. And he's got 46% control time for only 16% control time against. So Kyung Ho Kong's fights in the UFC have taken place in control time positions almost 63% of the time. While for Yahya, it's about 58, 64, 65% of the time. So both of these guys are spending about 2/3 of their fights in control time positions. So we got to believe that, both of these guys are most comfortable grappling. But in this case, can Ho Kong maybe take the grappling and put it to the side, knowing how comfortable Rani Yahya is on the ground, and maybe use his striking and that 6-inch reach advantage here to win a striking-based competition? He does have 2 wins in his career by knockout, while Rani Yahya doesn't have any knockout wins. So I would say that Ho Kong would probably be the one that would be more likely to win a striking-based competition. But Ho Kong's grappling defense, pretty good. 71.43% takedown defense. He gets taken down less than 1 time per 15 minutes. He's only giving up 16% control time, so he's almost out-controlling his opponents at a 3-to-1 ratio, while Rani Yahya is only out-controlling his opponents by about 10%. And Rani Yahya's takedown defense is absolutely pathetic at 25.93%. But we see that a lot with these Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu guys because a lot of times they're like, oh, you're shooting a takedown? Go ahead. I'd rather be on the ground anyway. So, yeah, he's only showing 26% takedown defense, but it's probably because he is so comfortable on the ground. And that's why. I mean, you're talking about all the 67% of his fights taking place in control time positions, so that shouldn't be surprising. If we look at the level of competition, I think this is where it gets interesting. Neither one of these guys is getting signature wins. The average opponent of Kyung Ho Kong has a record of 3.56 and 3.33, while the average Rani Yahya opponent has a losing record of 2.33 and 2.94. In terms of their wins, both of these guys are beating guys with an average losing record, and they're losing the guys that are pretty similar with just over a 1 win-to-loss ratio. And I want to take you through Rani Yahya's wins in the UFC because there's quite a few of them, but there are a bunch of names that you're really not going to recognize. So he's got a win over Mike Brown back in 2011, 2-4, a win over 0-4 Josh Grisby, a win over 1-5 Mizuto Hirota, a win over 0-2 Josh Clopton, a win over 2-3 Johnny Bedford, a win over 2-2 Masanori Kanehara. And that Kanehara, that 2-2 fighter, that's his signature win. Matthew Lopez, 2-4. Michinori Tanaka, 2-3. Henry Briones, 1-4. Russell Doan, 3-5. Luke Sanders, 3-5. And Ray Rodriguez, 0-3. The combined record of the opponents that Rani Yahya has beaten in the UFC has 18 wins and 44 losses. Yeah, a lot of people don't know that, because Yahya's lost to guys like Ricky Simon, Joe Soto, Tom Ninamaki back in the day and Chad Mendez. You know, you add up those records in 20 and 15, they're really good. But he's not gotten signature wins. He's never beaten anybody that even has a winning record in the UFC. Like I said, the best win that he has is over Masanari Kanehara, who's 2-2. And then if we look at Ho Kong, we see wins over Pyong-Wan Liu, 2-2, Brandon Davis, 3-5, Teruto Ishihara, 3-5, Guido Canetti, 2-4, Michinori Tanaka, 2-3, and Shinichi Shimizu, who's 0-1. Okay, so the combined record of the guys that Ho Kong has beaten, 12 wins, 20 losses. These guys are crushing cans. And he's lost to Ricardo Ramos and Chico Camus. So I wanted to bring that up because this is kind of a low-level fight. Despite the fact you see Rani Yahya with 18 UFC fights and a 12-4 record, you're like, oh, that's pretty good. But he hasn't beaten anybody with a winning record. And Ho Kong in his 9 UFC fights, 6-2 with a no contest. And you're like, oh, wow, that's a really good record. He hasn't beaten anybody with a winning record either. And so now, unless this fight ends in a draw, Brady, one of these guys is going to get their first UFC win over somebody that has a winning record. What could be more exciting than that? I don't know, but I have no clue who's going to win this fight, dude. Can you help me out here? Because I just went through all the stats. Maybe you can tell me something that'll get me leaning one way or another here, because I'm not sure if Kang wants to keep this standing or if he feels his grappling is good enough to win a wrestling match and to out-grapple Rani Yahya. I don't know what he's thinking here. I'm guessing that Yahya is like, let's please grapple.
Yeah.
But I don't know if he's going to get his way here. What are you thinking?
That's the hard part about it, man. Is Kang going to want to, engage in the grappling, which you take a look at his career and, watch his fights. He does that a ton. I mean, he takes guys down and he's a great grappler, don't get me wrong, but do you want to grapple with Rani Yahya? Somebody brought up in the chat, though, the cardio of Yahya is a huge concern, especially now at 36 years old. As a 36-year-old bantamweight, that cardio is a huge concern for me. So for me, I kind of feel like if Rani Yahya is going to win this fight, it's going to be by submission, and it's going to be by submission within the first round and a half. Outside of that, I do think Kang wins the fight, but man, if he does go to the mat, it's going to get really, really, really sweaty. So we will take a look at the odds here. We have Kang as a favorite, and he is minus 148. He did open up minus 200, and we have Rani Yahya opening up plus 170, currently plus 120. As far as the fight goes to decision, is minus 125 to the fight goes to decision, and minus 115 for the fight doesn't go to decision. Yeah, tricky, interesting fight because, on the feet, I do favor Kang. I think Kang has the better cardio as well. Has a better striking, like I mentioned. He's going to be the younger fighter as well, which is pretty huge here. But if this fight does hit the ground, is he going to be able to not get submitted? Kang has been submitted before, but I think it was like a long time ago. So can't really look into that all that too much. But Rani Yahya is definitely capable of getting a submission here. So that's what makes this fight so tricky to me. I will lean with the younger fighter in Kang just based on the fact that I think, hey, he probably will fight smart. He probably will try to keep this on the feet. He will extend this fight. He will have a better cardio going forward into the second and the third round. And I'm going to say he does win a decision, maybe a late finish. But I don't know if I'll get there from a betting perspective because, man, if this fight does go to the ground and it goes to the ground early, Kang could get put in some really, really bad spots. So as far as like a betting perspective, as of now, I'm probably staying away, Weezy.
I think I am too, man. This is hard because, I'm going to have to go and look at the tape and see what Ho Kang's striking looks like. Because if he's actually looked good at certain points with his striking, I might feel like he has a path here. But I don't like his path, because he's used that wrestling and that submission game path in order to win fights in the past. And that's playing right into what Rani Yahya wants. So it's so hard to know what the game plan is going to be for Ho Kang here. And yeah, dude, I'm not touching this one.
Yeah, I think I'm probably going to sit back and watch it as more of a fan because it's an intriguing fight. I don't hate it. It's very intriguing. Is Kang going to go to the mat with Rani Yahya? That's kind of the big question here for me. If he goes to the mat with him, I think he could. I think he'll be okay. But man, he's going to be putting himself into some real trouble for sure. So I'll take the younger guy in Kang, but I just don't know if I'll get there from a betting perspective. Next fight, we do have, oh, God, Cheyanne Buys going against Gloria de Paula. It's on the main card. I just don't get it. Cheyanne Buys, 26 years old, 5'3", 63-inch reach. Gloria de Paula, 26 years old, 5'5", 67-inch reach. I tried taping this fight today. Ended up just completely skipping it and decided to, work on other fights because, man, this fight is going to be close. I think it's going to be competitive. We have Cheyanne Buys in her last fight really dropped the ball. I think she was like minus 350, something crazy like that against Montserrat Ruiz, where Ruiz just kept taking her down, getting control time. As far as Gloria de Paula, she really dropped the ball against Jin Yu Fry, somebody we talked about earlier, who I'm definitely not high on. She dropped the ball in a fight where Fry took her down, and de Paula was content to just lay there. She just laid there. She didn't even attempt to work her way back up to the feet, because on the feet, de Paula was having a lot of success. It was just once Fry was able to get her down, she had absolutely no idea what to do when she was on her back. That was a very, very disappointing, very, very embarrassing performance by both Cheyanne Buys and Gloria de Paula, and I believe both of their UFC debuts. So now they're fighting each other. Very well could be like a loser leaves town, because man, both fighters made very seriously bad accounts for themselves in their first fights in the UFC. Not curious to get into the stats on this one, Weezy, but I am kind of curious to hear your thoughts on this one. But man, what a shit show this is.
Yeah, I got to tell you, the women's fights on this card are absolutely
bad.
Oh, they're bad, dude. They're bad. So let's put on a brave face and get through this as quickly as possible. Bum fights. Well, okay, so yeah, actually, so we got Buys, who's landing 4.1 strikes and only absorbing 1.67. That's pretty good. And DePaula is landing 3.33 and only absorbing 1.2. DePaula is really good on the feet. And from what I know, Buys is more of a wrestler, right? I mean, would you say that she's a wrestler?
A little bit. I mean, she doesn't go for as much takedowns as I thought she would, but when she does get them, she can. So I think it's a path to victory for her here.
Yeah, okay. Because, I mean, Gloria has looked really good when she was striking. And in order for Jin Yu Fry to beat her, she had to take her down in 2 separate rounds and use that wrestling, because when they did stand up, Gloria was piecing her up. But she couldn't stop those takedowns. She's got 71% takedown defense, but it wasn't good enough. I think a lot of those takedowns that she stopped were against Macias, right, in the Contender Series fight. Yeah, man, this is... If DePaula keeps it standing, I think she's going to win pretty easily. I think Buys is probably going to have to take her down. I mean, we don't think of Jin Yu Fry as a wrestler and a grappler, but that's how she beat Gloria DePaula. I think if Buys is smart, that's exactly what she's going to do. She's married to a South African wrestler. Hopefully, her wrestling is going to be on point. I see this as wrestler Cheyanne Buys versus striker Gloria DePaula. I'm still pissed off at DePaula for losing that fight to Jin Yu Fry. I was heavy on her that week in DraftKings. I even said to the Discord that if Jin Yu Fry finished Gloria DePaula, I would change my name to Jin Yu Weezy in the Discord, which I never had to do because she didn't finish her. But I felt like an asshole because I was so confident that DePaula was going to stop the takedowns and win that fight on the feet, and she didn't. She couldn't stop Jin Yu Fry's takedowns. I don't know if she's going to be able to stop Cheyanne Buys' takedowns, but I can tell you one thing. I don't care. I'm not betting on this fight, man. I'm done with this one. Abdurakhimov Daukaus is next. Let's get to a good one here.
Dude, this fight, oh, man. First of all, we'll take a look at the line. We have Cheyanne Buys. I guess people didn't learn their lesson. She's now minus 190. And de Paula is plus 160. If I was in the business of betting this fight, which I'm definitely not, it probably would be a dog or pass situation, because like you mentioned, if Buys does take this fight down to the mat, I think she will have success. I think she's actually a decent grappler, but you take a look at her fights and she doesn't go for the takedowns as much as you'd like to see. She has attempted 2 thus far between Contender Series and the UFC, but prior to that, she's not going for takedowns as much as you'd like in this fight, especially. And if this fight does play outstanding for 15 minutes, this is going to be a very, very competitive fight. Buys is not going to look minus 190, especially, de Paula, she has some good striking. She comes forward, throws a lot of volume. She's going to have a 4-inch reach advantage as well. She's going to be the bigger fighter. So, yeah, I don't get the line on Buys at minus 190. I think if she does fight smart and get it down to the mat, she could maybe look minus 190. But, man, you couldn't pay me to bet on this fight, Uncle Weezy. As far as the fight goes to decision, it probably is going to decision. It's sitting at minus 270. Fight doesn't go is at plus 190. Yeah, I'm with you. I'm passing here. As far as a pick, I'm actually going to take the dog. I'm going to take the dog in Paula, but will I bet it? No. Plus 160. It honestly, it's a little tempting, but man, I just don't want to get involved. I don't want to get involved in this fight whatsoever.
I'm not getting involved either, but yeah, if you put a gun to my head, I'd take the plus money simply because Cheyanne Baez didn't look great against Ruiz. B, these judges are fucking morons. So if it goes to decision, flip a coin. Doesn't even matter who won the fight. Sal Dionato is gonna, drunkenly write the wrong name on the fucking card, and and then McCarthy will be right behind him, and then the rest of the clowns. It's like a Keystone Cops over there at the side of the ring. So yeah, man, I'm not betting on this fight because it probably does go to decision, and then you'll get your money robbed by the Vegas judges. So no thanks, man. Abdurakhimov Daukaus, let's go.
Yeah, I think they need to start like drug testing the judges and all that. Maybe breath test them or something because something's going on, man. But yeah, pass, big pass for me. But let's get to a good fight. This is probably, I want to say, like the second or maybe third best fight on the card. Like this is a really good fight, a fight that we were supposed to see last week. I believe one of the cornermen, I don't know which fighter it was. I think it was on the Shamil side, did test positive for COVID. Neither Shamil or Daukaus tested positive, so they're both good to go. But we have Shamil here, who is 39 years old, 6'3", 76-inch reach. As far as Daukaus, 31 years old, 6'3", 76-inch reach. As far as Shamil goes, he did get knocked out against Derek Lewis. No shame in that. Did knock out Chase Sherman after that. It beat Andre Arlovsky in a decision. Lost by knockout to Marcin Tybura, and then lost or beat Marcin Tybura by knockout, and then lost by knockout against Curtis Blades. As far as Chris Daukaus, did make his UFC debut against Parker Porter, was able to knock him out, knocked out Rogerio Nascimento, who we saw fight the other week, and then knocked out Alexei Oleinik in the first round as well. Daukaus being 4-1 in his last 5 fights, and Shamil being 3-2 in his last 5 fights. And a very interesting fight, a fight we did break down last week, actually. I believe it got canceled like the day after we did Stat Diggers. So we already talked about this one a little bit, but we will recap what we said and get through the stats as well. But I guess the one thing that I wanted to mention was, Chris Daukaus, you take a look at some of his fights earlier in his career and compare him to now, like he looks like a completely different fighter. It looked like, 4, 5, 6 years ago, looked like he wasn't really, taking it all that serious. And you take a look at his Instagram, this guy is in the best shape of his entire career. There's a rumor going around that he's going to be retiring as a full-time police officer and going to be focusing completely on fighting, in which he should. And it's just funny because we thought, Chris Daukaus coming in, everybody was calling him the bad Daukaus. We thought Kyle Daukaus was the good Daukaus, but no, it's the other way around. Chris Daukaus is the good Daukaus. Kyle Daukaus is the bad Daukaus. But yeah, I think Chris Daukaus is taking it serious. He's young. He's in his prime. This is the best Daukaus we're getting. But we have Shamil, who is actually a really good fighter. We have not seen him in a while. He is coming off of a 2-year layoff, coming off of some health issues as well. But yeah, you take a look at Shamil. He's really well-rounded. So I think this is a great fight. I'm looking forward to it. And can't wait to hear your thoughts on this one, Uncle Weezy.
Yeah, this is great. This is a great fight. I love watching heavyweight fights, and both of these guys are very good all around. That's something we don't get treated to very often with heavyweight fights, is when, you got a striker versus a grappler, or a striker versus a striker. Both of these guys are really good all around. Daukaus is a black belt. Abdurakhimov is a master of sport in Sambo. Both of these guys have got really nice boxing. I told you last week, that I think Abdurakhimov's boxing is really, really good, really smooth, really well coached. He's very, very fundamentally sound, and he's got fast hands, very slick. And Daukaus, of course, right there with him. I mean, even more power than Abdurakhimov. And he's 8 years younger. Look, Daukaus is a very young heavyweight, and he's already 3-0 in the UFC. You got Abdurakhimov at 39 years old, coming off a punctured lung and a 2-year layoff. So, yeah, this is something we're going to see a big experience advantage for Shamil Abdurakhimov. We're going to see a very much tougher level of competition for Shamil Abdurakhimov, and we're going to see in the history of these guys' tape when we watch it that Abdurakhimov is the better grappler here, and he does use top control in order to win fights. While Daukaus is really more reliant on his hands, even though he is a good all-around fighter, he's just clearly way better boxer than most of his opponents, so he shouldn't have to use his grappling when he's knocking people out in the first round. Why would he? So, yeah, Abdurakhimov more experienced. 100% of Daukaus's wins by KO in the UFC, 91% as a pro. So this guy's a knockout artist. While we see that Shamil is getting 20% of his wins by sub and 45% of his wins by knockout. Now, the thing that gets us to bet the fight doesn't go to decision here is that in the 8 combined losses for Daukaus and Shamil, we've got 7 of them finishing inside the distance. Boy, we love that. 87.5% implied probability that this fight finishes inside the distance if we use the combined loss total. So that's really good. We're talking about Shamil lands exactly what he absorbs, 2.45, while Chris Daukaus is landing 11.78 significant strikes per minute and only absorbing 3.22. Obviously, that's in a very limited sample size, only 7 minutes in the UFC cage. And we see that striking defense really good, 65% for Daukaus, about 59% for Abdurakhimov. Daukaus way more accurate, as we would expect, at 61.76% to 44% for Shamil. And we see that 4.76 knockdowns per total significant strikes landed percentage. So he's landing a knockdown on almost 1 out of 20 significant strikes landed. So Daukaus showing a ton of power, great hands, a lot of knockout ability. When we look at the grappling numbers, Chris Daukaus has 3 fights and 0 takedown attempts. So we see that Shamil Abdurakhimov has 8 fights and 29 takedown attempts. So 7 out of 29 for Shamil on his offensive wrestling, 24.14% takedown percentage. He's getting 1.23 takedowns per 15 minutes, 14% control time. So he's not a big control time monster. And frankly, 7 takedowns in 8 fights, not fantastic either, but good enough if he does go to it and he is successful getting the takedowns. If he gets 2, that might be all he needs to win the fight, because he just needs to win 2 rounds here, and we don't know what Daukaus is going to look like off his back, especially with somebody that's a master of sport and sambo on top of him and Shamil. So Daukaus out-controlling his opponents 18% to 5%, while Shamil is out-controlling his opponents 14% to 11%. But, we see some of the names on Shamil Abdurakhimov's resume. Wins over losses to Curtis Blades, wins over guys like Marcin Tybura, who's on a 4-fight win streak right now. He's got wins over Tybura, Arlovsky, Chase Sherman, Walt Harris, and Anthony Hamilton, while the guys that he's lost to, Tim Johnson back in 2015, and then the only 2 losses since then were to Derek Lewis and Curtis Blades. So he has fought very good competition, much better competition than Daukaus has fought in his career. We do see that, when he did go to the wrestling, earlier in his career, he wasn't all that successful with it. 0 of 1, 0 of 2, 1 of 8 in the Walt Harris fight, 4 of 11 in the Derek Lewis fight. And then since then, he's only gotten 2 takedowns. They were both in the Arlovsky fight. So he doesn't go to his grappling as much as we'd like to see him go to his grappling, especially against a power puncher like Daukaus. But Daukaus's wins were over Alexei Oleinik, Rodrigo Nascimento, and Parker Porter. None of those 3 guys have a losing record in the UFC. So he is 3-0 against pretty solid competition here. I see why Daukaus is a favorite. He's 8 years younger. He's the more powerful striker. I think Abdurakhimov is a little bit better overall, and I think that Abdurrakhimov's striking is severely underrated. I think he's way better than people think he is on the feet. But, the younger man, the busier man, the healthier man, the man that's probably in better shape and has a better physique right now is probably Chris Daukaus. I'm going to pick him to win this by knockout, but I think that line is a little bit too juiced for my liking right now. So I think what I would probably try to do is bet the fight doesn't go to decision here, because like we said, 7 of the 8 combined losses of these gentlemen coming inside the distance, that's an 87.5% implied probability. So, that's talking about, could be a minus 400 line. We're probably going to get it a lot better than that. So.
Yeah, Average Joe brought up a very good point here. What if Daukaus gets taken down And what if he gets extended past the first round, dog, or past spot to me? And that's a really good question, because you take a look at some of the Daukaus fights on the regional scene, and when he does get out of the first round, the cardio is just not there. He tends to, if he does get out of the first round, he tends to get finished more often than not. His takedown defense does not look good on the regional scene as well. He looks very tired if it does get out of that first round. And he has been finished by submission. I believe it was like an Americana. And then he also has been knocked out 2 times as well. So Daukaus has been finishing all 3 of his losses. It's just, there are a ton of red flags on the Daukaus side, especially if you do watch the tape on those fights, 3, 4, 5, 6 years ago. It's just, I think that Daukaus doesn't exist anymore. I think he's gotten a lot better. I think he's taken his job a lot more serious. I think he's in much, much better shape. And man, Daukaus has been looking good. His hands are so fast, tons of volume and tons of power as well. So yeah, if Shamil can get him down, I don't know. We'll have to see what happens, but I just think that Daukaus is a new and improved fighter than he was, say, 4, 5, 6 years ago. I think the cardio is better. Believe it or not, he's a black belt in BJJ as well. And if he can stuff the takedowns, if he can keep this on the feet, there's a very good chance, a very, very good chance that Daukaus does find a knockout here. And that's kind of how I'm leaning as well. Daukaus, like you mentioned, a 91% finish rate. Both guys combined have been finished in, 7 out of their 8 fights, or 7 out of their 8 losses combined. So yeah, I'm definitely thinking violence. We'll take a look at the odds here. -185 for Daukaus and +160 for Shamil. Yeah, honestly, I'm probably going to attack it from a violence perspective instead. I think I'm going to have it cover both sides here. You have the over-under set at 1.5 rounds, as expected. The under is sitting at +125. I might be looking at maybe the fight does not start round 3. I also really like those alternative under 2.5 rounds as well. Even like the fight doesn't go to decision, -230. Like there's a very good chance that this fight finishes, in my opinion. I'm going to say Daukaus does win. I'm going to say Daukaus does win in that first round. But in terms of like a betting perspective, I'm kind of thinking violence, Uncle Weezy.
I'm thinking the exact same thing. And like I say, I think that line is just a little bit too wide for my liking. And this is a step up in competition, in my opinion. But also, I think that when you fight guys like Parker Porter and Nascimento, and then Oleinik, who's really old right now, it looks like you're fighting a couple of rookies and then a guy that's on his way out. But, Oleinik 8-7. Nascimento's got some he's got some promise, in my opinion. And hell, Parker Porter looked fantastic against Parisian. So he bounced back from that loss against Daukaus. So I think Daukaus, even though on paper he's not fighting as good a competition as Abdurakhimov, that gap might be a little bit closer than some people think it is. But yeah, I can't wait for this fight. And I think that the fight doesn't go to decision, the under 2.5, or the fight doesn't start round 3 are all fantastic ways to make money on this one.
Yep, I'm definitely with you there. So before we get into the next fight, if you all can smash that like button, nearly 200 people in here. We have 127 likes, which typically we try to get to that 100 mark by the time we get out of here, but the show's definitely really growing, all thanks to you guys. Maybe we get 150 likes by the time we get out of here. That'd be much, much appreciated. Smash that like. Me, Uncle Weezy, and Pub Sports Radio all really do appreciate the sport week in and week out. So we'll get to the next fight, which is Sam Alvey versus Roman Kopylov. We have Sam Alvey, who is 35 years old, 6'2", 75-inch reach. Kopylov is 30 years old, 6 foot, 75-inch reach. So Kopylov did make his UFC debut against Carl Roberson. He was submitted, I believe, in the 3rd round of that fight, and he is 4-1 in his last 5 fights. Sam Alvey, he had a knockout loss to Jimmy Crute, a decision loss to Klitzen Abreu, a split decision loss against Ryan Spann, which Alvey very well could have won that fight, I thought, and I was pretty big on Spann in that fight, and I thought Alvey could have really won that fight. It was a close one, and then a split decision, a draw against Da Un Jung, and again, I was very high on Da Un Jung in that spot, and I really thought that Sam Alvey won. And then we had a submission loss against Julian Marquez in a fight where he got hurt bad and then submitted shortly after, and he is 0-4-1 in his last 5 fights. I believe he's 0-5-1 in his last 6 fights. So Sam Alvey has not won in a very long time. Kopylov, 30 years old, young guy. I'm assuming he's going to be making improvements from what I've seen. Good striker. Maybe not the best ground game. Roberson was able to take him down and submit him quite easily, but I don't think we'll have to worry about that here. I'm sure Uncle Weezy is going to talk about why, but yeah, interesting fight, I guess. Will Sam Alvey get a win finally, or he probably will be cut after? If he loses this fight, there's a good chance he's probably cut, to be honest.
Yeah, you'd have to figure that. You know, I mean, he's 35 years old. This guy has 50 professional fights. This is going to be his 51st fight. And this will be his 22nd UFC fight. So this guy's been around forever. 10-10-1, over 206 minutes in the UFC cage, over 500 minutes in the cage as a pro. This guy, Alvey's been everywhere. He's fought everybody. Got a ton of power in that left hand. Great takedown defense. Look, he's a real simple fighter to break down. The guy keeps the fight standing. He wants to knock you out with his left hand, and he basically only counter punches. He's just waiting for you to throw, catch you off guard with that left hand, and knock you out. Very simple guy to break down. Kopylov got subbed by Roberson in his debut, but Sam Alvey has one takedown in 21 UFC fights. So that is a very low percentage for those of you who don't do math well on the top of your head. But, I mean, this guy's not taking down anybody, and he's not going to try to take down anybody. He wants to knock people down. And with 663 significant strikes landed, he has 7 knockdowns. So 7 knockdowns in his UFC career. Guy's definitely been knocking people down and knocking people out. He's got a 50% knockout rate in his 10 wins in the UFC. So the guy is a knockout threat. And we look at Kopylov, he's got an 88% finish rate by knockout. 7 of his 8 pro wins have come by knockouts, but 100% of his losses have come by submission. So, yeah, 50 pro fights for Alvey, only 9 for Kopylov. 513 minutes of experience for Alvey, only 100 for Kopylov. 21 UFC fights for Alvey, 1 for Kopylov. But Kopylov's 30 years old and Alvey's 35. So we're not saying that Alvey's 40 yet. He's not completely over the hill, but he's got a ton of fucking tread on the tires. And he's been knocked out a lot, and he's been hurt a lot, and he's been through a lot of wars. So, you know, you'd like to see the younger guy. You'd think that he'll have a good chance here if his striking's good to hang with Alvey for a while here. I mean, I'm not going to really even talk about the grappling because I don't think Kopylov's going to go to the grappling here. There'd be no point in it. Alvey's got an 83% takedown defense over his UFC career. He's successfully defended 47 of 57 takedowns against. So I don't think Kopylov's going to take him down. This will probably be a striking match. Probably somebody gets knocked out. But I'm not going to go any further into it than that because I just don't know shit about Roman Kopylov, if I'm being honest. So I don't know how to break down this fight other than telling you exactly what I know about Sam Alvey. He's a counter puncher, a power puncher, a lefty, and you're not going to take him down. I don't know how Kopylov wins this fight, though. Can you tell me?
Yeah, I mean, you know, watching tape on him, he's not terrible. And what I did notice is this guy breaks people. I mean, you take a look at it. He has a finish in round 4, a corner stoppage, not just one corner stoppage. It looks like he has like 2 or 3 corner stoppages. He makes people quit. He comes forward. He throws a lot of volume. And, man, it's just hard to pick Sam Alvey at this point. We have not seen him win. I don't know exactly how long ago it was, but I do know it's been a while since we have seen Sam Alvey win. And this is to be honest, like this is probably a winnable fight for him. You mentioned the huge gap in experience, the huge gap in level of competition. But, you know, Kopylov is not terrible. I really like his striking. He has really fast hands. He's going to definitely out volume Sam Alvey. Alvey is like as low volume as you can be. But for Sam Alvey to win, it's probably going to have to be a knockout. And could it happen? Potentially. But it's just really hard to pick Sam Alvey at this point. Like you mentioned, this fight's going to stay standing. I kind of thought, hey, maybe Sam Alvey can get this fight down to the mat. I looked at his stats. He averages like 0.0 takedowns per 50 minutes, meaning he has 1 takedown in, like you mentioned, I think you said like 22 UFC fights, which is just crazy. So, yes, to stay standing, I'm going to say Kopylov does out-volume Sam Alvey. I don't know if he finishes Sam Alvey or not. Alvey, you know, typically somewhat durable. I know he got finished in his last fight, but in 45 fights, Sam Alvey has only been finished if I can find, he's only been finished 5 times in 46 fights, 3 by knockout. Obviously, Kopylov's not going to submit him. So, 3 knockout losses, 46 fights. Sam Alvey's somewhat durable. I'll say Kopylov does out-volume him and wins a pretty one-sided decision, but I hate to say it, but I think Sam Alvey is somewhat live in this fight. He has a ton of power. Kopylov's still young in the game, still very unexperienced. I think he's a skilled guy, but just not overly impressed, to be honest. Not the best level of competition. So for me, the pick will be Kopylov, but from a betting perspective, I guess it's Sam Alvey, but I'm not going to run to the window and bet Sam Alvey. There's no way. Kopylov, opened up minus 250, currently minus 250. Sam Alvey opened up plus 210, currently plus 210 as well. So kind of a pretty big price tag. And, as expected, Sam Alvey has not won in I think like 6 or 7 fights. So I get it, but just not overly impressed with Kopylov. As far as the fight goes to decision, fight goes is plus 135, and fight doesn't go is minus 175. Really no strong lean there one way or another, but we got to kind of take a look at, Sam Alvey and just kind of take a look at his last couple fights. Against Juliana Marquez, not a great look, was outlanded 61-29, but prior to that, Da Eun Jung, I really thought he won that fight. Sam Alvey actually outlanded Da Eun Jung 59-56. I don't know why Da Eun Jung was so hesitant in that fight, but Sam Alvey did outland him in the first round 22-20. Also outlanded him in total strikes 27-20 in that first round. The second round, Alvey outlanded him 23-19. So I thought Alvey was actually up 2-0 going to the third. And then in the third round, Da Eun Jung does outland Alvey 17-14, does hurt Alvey, drops him. And then he also hurts him again in the third round as well. And I kind of thought Alvey won that fight, or at least a draw, or it was a draw. But yeah, I really thought Alvey won that fight. So, and then there also was another fight where it was really competitive, the Ryan Spann fight, where Alvey actually outlands Ryan Spann 57-51. Spann does take him down 2 times, but still outlanding Spann. I mean, he's being competitive. He's being competitive against some pretty solid competition. So I don't know, man. I'll pick Kopylov. Maybe I do change my pick by the time I do my prediction video, because just taking a look at it, I do think the line is way off, and maybe Sam Alvey can get a win here, but you probably won't see me betting Sam Alvey in this fight.
Yeah, you won't see me betting this fight, period, I don't think, and Sam Alvey's fights can be very low volume. He does wait to counterpunch, and everybody knows that about him. So sometimes, you just see people staring at each other in the center of the cage. So yeah, man, I'm staying away from this one. The main event here is very, very compelling. We went through 14 fights, some of them trash, in order to get to this main event. But I think it's worth the wait, man. This is a good one.
We are finally here. And shout out to Tajik. This is going to be the longest Stat Diggers episode ever. It already is, I believe. Keep up the good work, guys. Appreciate that, Tajik, the GOAT. Yeah, long episode for sure. I'll be making sure to get the timestamps right after I get off here. But yeah, long episode, 15 fights, some not so good, but some good. And speaking of good, we have a good main event here. I actually don't hate this main event whatsoever. I think it's going to be a very fun one to break down as well. Me and Uncle Weezy will be recording a video sometime tonight on this video. I'm going to be posting it on my channel, DFS by the Numbers. A main event deep dive that we do like to go really deep into the matchup. That'll be posted sometime tomorrow morning. But we do have a very good main event here. Uriah Hall going against Sean Strickland. Uriah Hall is 36 years old, 6 foot with a 79-inch reach. Sean Strickland, 30 years old, 6'1" with a 76-inch reach. So some things to point out. Sean Strickland will be 6 years younger than Uriah Hall, and Sean Strickland will also have a 1-inch height advantage, but a 3-inch reach disadvantage. So taking a look at the last few fights, Uriah Hall is 4-1 in his last 5 fights. Knockout loss against Paula Costa, a knockout win against Bavon Lewis, a split decision win over Antonio Carlos Jr., a knockout win over Anderson Silva, and then just recently a knockout win over Chris Weidman in one of the nastiest leg injuries you'll ever see. And then as far as Sean Strickland, 4-1 in his last 5 fights as well, did lose to Lazzez Zaleski dos Santos by a knockout, that being Sean Strickland's only knockout loss in 26 pro fights. It was a head kick that landed perfectly. And again, that was the only time he has been knocked out, but it was a very nice head kick. And as far as the next fight, did beat Taleb by knockout. He beat Marshman by decision. And then he knocked out Brendan Allen, and then also won a decision over Christoph Jocko as well. So both guys, pretty good form here. Both guys have each won their last 4 fights, and I think it's a pretty solid main event we have here this weekend, Weezy.
Very solid, man. This should be a striker's delight, although we could see Strickland go to the grappling if he doesn't like how it's going on the feet. So, yeah, Uriah Hall, surprisingly 36 years old. He's getting up there. But Uriah is going to have a 3-inch reach advantage here. Both of these guys have 26 fights. The total cage time in their career, 228 for Hall, 246 for Strickland. The career lengths, 15 years for Hall, 13 years for Strickland. Both of these guys very experienced. Both of these guys have fought at least half of their career in the UFC. 13 UFC fights for Strickland, 17 for Hall, 10-7 for Hall, 10-3 for Strickland. almost identical amounts of time in the cage, as Strickland's fights have had a slightly higher average time. In both of these guys, good finishers. Strickland finishing at a 60% clip, 82% clip for Uriah Hall. And when they lose, we see that Strickland's getting knocked out in 1 out of his 3 total losses. And Uriah Hall's been knocked out in 4 out of his 9 total losses. But what's impressive is that in 10 wins for UFC, 10 UFC wins for Uriah Hall, he's gotten 8 knockouts. This guy is a legit knockout threat here, and he is still doing it. He's still getting these knockouts. He's very, very dangerous on the feet. Everybody knows that already. So if we look at the striking numbers, we see that Uriah is landing 3.34 and absorbing 3.54. So he's actually absorbing more than he lands, while Strickland landing 5.14 and only absorbing 3.64. When we look at the power numbers, we see a big power advantage for Uriah Hall here, as he's landing a knockdown on 1.54% of his significant strikes landed. So that would be about 7, I would say, total knockdowns in his UFC career. That's really good. And then we're talking about for Strickland, he's got 808 significant strikes, 4 UFC knockdowns, and he's getting 0.38 knockdowns per 15 minutes. Neither one of these guys are what I would call chinny, as they're only getting knocked down 0.29 and 0.19 times per 15 minutes. If we look at the grappling, Strickland 12 out of 20 on his takedown attempts. So when he wants those takedowns, he does get them. And we see that Uriah Hall has successfully defended 30 of 43 takedown attempts against, for almost 70% takedown defense. He's getting taken down 1.25 times for 15 minutes, being out-controlled. He controls his opponent 7.5% of the time, but gets controlled 26.4% of the time. So about 35% of Hall's fights are taking place in control time positions, while for Strickland, it's about 21. So Strickland is a little more successful keeping the fight in the center of the cage, where he does like to box. He's got great hands. And then Hall is more of a Taekwondo type striker, where he's got explosive kicks in addition to really nice hands and a really varied striking attack. So, we could see Strickland go to the wrestling here and try to amass some top control, but he only averages 1.14 takedowns per 15 minutes, only about 1.5 takedown attempts per fight. So if you're counting on Strickland winning this fight because of his wrestling, you might be stretching a little bit, because he hasn't shown the willingness to wrestle offensively a whole ton in his career. As a matter of fact, when he could have against Jack Marshman, he chose not to at all. Now, he was controlling that fight on the feet, but if you know anything about Jack Marshman, the easy path to victory against Marshman is to take that dude down. He didn't even try to take him down. And that probably would have been an even easier path for victory for him. But, he is really good on the ground. I think one of the reasons that people were pissed off at Brendan Allen when he didn't try to take down Strickland is that people don't realize how good of a grappler Strickland is. He's credentialed. He's experienced. He's a black belt, and he's a killer on the ground. So I think that Brendan Allen probably was actually scared to try to take down Strickland, and was hoping that him training at Sanford MMA would give him the chops and the striking skills in order to win a striking-based decision over Strickland. It did not work out for him, but we saw Allen take that next step last night by beating Punahele Soriano by decision. So, these guys that Strickland are beating recently, Brendan Allen and Jocko, are good wins. And then we got Uriah Hall, with wins over Bevon Lewis, Antonio Carlos Jr., and Anderson Silva and Weidman. So, these guys are both pretty hot right now. They're both on 4-fight winning streaks. It's just that Strickland's a little bit younger. He's a little more diverse. I see why he's a favorite here, but if he doesn't go to his wrestling, I think he's just going to be playing with fire, striking with Uriah Hall. All it takes is one from Hall. And Hall does have 54% striking defense, so not fantastic, but not very poor either. But that 67.86% striking defense for Sean Strickland is something you can really hang your hat on. If we go to the strength of schedule, 1.89 ratio for Hall, 2.17 ratio for Strickland. So Strickland's average opponent has a 6 and 2.77 record, while Hall's average opponent has an 8.47 and 4.47 record. So both of these guys are fighting really tough competition with way more wins than losses, and over 8 UFC fights on average for Strickland, and almost 13 UFC fights for Hall. So we're talking about guys that are fighting very tough, very top level competition here in the middleweight division. And we see that Strickland's losses are a little bit better than Hall's, as he's losing to a guy with an average record of 9.67 and 2, while Hall's losses are coming to guys like Paulo Costa, average record 8.71 and 4.1. So if we look at just take a look at the strength of schedule and look at the list of opponents for these guys. Just take me just a second to get up here. So the wins for Uriah Hall are over Chris Lieben, 12 and 10, Thiago Santos, 13 and 8, Ron Stallings, 1 and 2, Bangbose, 1 and 4, Musasi, 9 and 3, Jatko, 9 and 5, Bevan Lewis, 3 and 3, Antonio Carlos Jr., 7 and 5, Anderson Silva, 17 and 7, and Chris Weidman, 11 and 6. And the losses for Hall have come to Paulo Costa, 5 and 1, Musasi, 9 and 3, Brunson, 13 and 5, Whitaker, 14 and 3, Natal back in 2015, 9 and 7, John Howard back in 2013, 7 and 7, and then Gastelum back in 2013 on the Ultimate Fighter finale, 11 and 7 record. So he's fighting excellent competition, and it's pretty much the same thing for Strickland. The wins are over Jotko, Brendan Allen, 5 and 1, Marshman, 3 and 5, Taleb, 7 and 5, Court McGee, 9 and 9, Breeze, 5 and 3, Garcia, 5 and 5, Igor Araujo, 2 and 2, Luke Barnett, 3 and 3, Robert McDaniel, 1 and 2. And his only 3 losses in the UFC have come to Elizo Zaleski dos Santos at 170, 8 and 3 record, Kamaru Usman, the welterweight GOAT, 14 and 0, and Ponzinibbio, 10 and 3. So yeah, real solid competition for both of these guys. Which way are you leaning on this one?
It's kind of a tough fight to break down. By the way, Tajik Bey, Strickland should get the nod, but Uriah will have early chances. At plus 200 is good value, but it's not enough to bet him. Sean should be about minus 160. Appreciate that, Tajik, for the dono and your wisdom. And I kind of agree. I think it should be line closer. We'll take a look at the line here. We have Sean Strickland opening up minus 180, currently minus 210. Uriah Hall opening up plus 155 and currently plus 180. The problem is, man, I think Sean Strickland is the better fighter. I mean, he lands 5.14 significant strikes per minute, only absorbs 3.64 for a positive 1.5, a significant strike differential. And you mentioned a 67% striking defense. Very, very impressive numbers there. Whereas you have Uriah Hall lands 3.34, lesser volume. He absorbs 3.54. So he actually has a negative significant strike differential of 0.2 and a 53% striking defense. And then you mentioned the grappling a little bit. Going into it, I thought, Sean Strickland could, go out there and potentially mix in the takedowns, because you mentioned he's a very good ground game, a very, very underrated ground game as well. It's just he doesn't really like to go to it. And I don't know if you guys were watching. I believe it was yesterday. It was they put out a promo during UFC Vegas 32 for Strickland and Hall was getting interviewed. He was talking about saying he wants to bite down on his mouthpiece and stand and bang with Uriah Hall. Are you kidding me? Like, that's what he wants to do? He said someone's going to sleep. He wants to stand in the middle and bang until one man falls. Like, what? That should not be your path to victory against Uriah Hall. So with that being said, will I lay minus 210 on Sean Strickland? Absolutely not, especially after hearing that he wants to bite down on his mouthpiece and swing with Uriah Hall. Like, really, that's your game plan. So I think it'd be smart to mix in the takedowns. I think it would be smart to try to stay on the outside. But if he does come in there and he does brawl with Uriah Hall, that's literally something you do not want to do. Uriah Hall has an insane amount of power. With that said, Sean Strickland is pretty durable. 26 fights, only 1 knockout loss, and that was a head kick that would have knocked out anybody against Elizo Zaleski dos Santos. If anybody's chinny in this fight, it's going to be Uriah Hall, who's been finished 4 times by knockout in 26 fights. So it's a tough fight, man, because I really honestly believe that Sean Strickland is the better fighter, but does it really matter when Uriah Hall has all that power? That's kind of how I'm struggling with it. And then you take a look at the line, like Sean Strickland minus 210. maybe if he would go out there and implement his wrestling and get takedowns and mix it up, but it's just not something he does. So very, very close fight. I 100% disagree with the line. I do think they should be closer to a pick'em. And you take a look at the fight goes to decision plus 135. The fight doesn't go to decision is minus 175. Honestly, I think if they do set the over-under at maybe like 4.5 rounds, maybe 3.5 rounds, I might be looking at the under, especially if Strickland does come in here and wants to go to war with Uriah Hall. I think the under could actually be a pretty solid look, because obviously if Uriah Hall wins, he's not going to win a decision. It's going to be Uriah Hall by knockout. And I think with the same thing, Strickland, I think he very well can get a knockout himself. So for me, I'm kind of thinking violence in this main event, Weezy.
Yeah, it could easily happen. I was just going through the advanced stats here, and I just decided to try something here because we know that, the path of least resistance if you're going to fight Uriah Hall is why I stand with him. Try to take him down, right? So Uriah Hall has been taken down in 1, 2, 3, 4. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 fights. And in those 7 fights, he is 2-5. So, yeah, if you take him down, and I'm talking about just once, in these fights that he's been taken down, these were the fights against Antonio Carlos Jr., Mousasi, the one that he lost, Whitaker, Mousasi again, Natal, Howard, and Gastelum. Loss, win, loss, win. So, yeah, this guy is 2-5 when he gets taken down. So I would, if I were Strickland, I would go for takedowns here, and I would just, not bite down in the mouthpiece, but if you look at, he's only got 12 takedowns, Strickland, in all of his fights. He's only gotten more than 1 takedown 3 different times. He was 3 for 3 against Court McGee. He was 3 for 3 against Igor Araujo, and he was 2 for 4 against Santiago Ponzinibbio. And in those fights, he's 2-1. He did lose to Ponzinibbio despite the fact that he got 2 takedowns. But, yeah, I'd like to see him go to the takedowns here. Uriah Hall, 2-5 when he gets taken down. It's going to be a 5-round fight. Uriah Hall's got crazy power. I wouldn't just stand and bang with the guy for 5 rounds. But if he does, dude, this is going to be a hell of a main event. Think about how exciting this fight will be if these 2 dudes just really just stand in the middle and just swing. Because that would be a great way to finish off this card, because this is not the best card from top to bottom, but this could be a hell of a main event, and I'm really looking forward to it. And I do like the violence play here, because 5 rounds for 2 guys that hit as hard as these guys, and with Strickland being as well-rounded as I think he is, yeah, I could definitely see this one finishing inside the distance, and that might be how I play this one.
Yep, I like it for sure. Can't wait to see where they do set that over under. Would love them to set it at the 4.5 mark. I love that, but we'll definitely have to see there. So, yeah, guys, that wraps it up. We did it. 15 fights, the most we have ever done on Stat Diggers. Thank you guys so much for sticking with us. Kind of shout out what we got going on here. For me, I will be spending the rest of tonight and then tomorrow researching the card, and then I will be posting my full card breakdown and prediction video early Tuesday morning. And I do have a live stream on my channel, 7:00 p.m. Eastern time. As far as on Pub Sports Radio, I do go live every Tuesday, 7:00 p.m. Eastern time for DraftKings. I do a DraftKings show there, which, by the way, I have very special news that I will announce next week on Stat Diggers. Can't wait. We have some huge plans for that Tuesday slot. We're about to change the game again, but I'm not going to announce it just yet. You have to stay tuned for next week. Cannot wait to announce it. I'm very excited. But yeah, you can follow me on Twitter, DFS_numbers. Instagram is DFS by the numbers. I'll be posting all my bets there on Saturday for free. But yeah, that's about it for me. Uncle Weezy, what do you got going on, and where can they find you?
Check me out on Twitter at MMA Weezy. Check me out on YouTube, Uncle Weezy. I do balls deep breakdowns of usually 3 or 4 fights every single week. I'll be starting with Abdurakhimov Daukaus, because I was going to do that one last week, but we didn't get it. So I'll probably break down Kang Yahya. I might break down Anglin and Bagdasarian, as I think that could be a really interesting fight. And maybe one other. The Lawrence Jones probably will be a really good one as well. So come check me out, Uncle Weezy on YouTube, at MMA Weezy on Twitter. I'd like to thank everybody out there for joining us today and sitting through 15 fights of analysis. Big shout out to Tajik Bey for all the donos. Don't ask, don't tell. Dan Goldstein, thank you for the donos. You guys are helping support the show. We really appreciate that. Thanks for spending your Sunday night with us. We will see you next week with some big news. Can't wait to do it again. Let's make some money on UFC Vegas 33.
Yep. Shout out to Weezy. Put in the work. He put in the work on vacation, on a golf trip, was able to get the advanced stats done, the matchup template. Shout out to Weezy. Really do appreciate that. If you guys can hit the like on your way out, that'd be much, much appreciated. And we will see you next week, as always, 7:15 p.m. on Sunday. So that's about it, guys, and good luck for your action for UFC Vegas 33. And as always, let's make some money. See you guys.